that is kind of important that we do that. I almost missed that out the other night. That was kind of scary. Got it with like 5 seconds to go. All right, here we go. And, we got about 1 minute here. 1 minute. Let me just say hello to everyone in this chat room. Hi, I'm Dave. There we go. That's all done. And who else do we have here? Who's entered the chat room without me knowing? Gorgeous Jenny has returned. There she is. I don't think I missed anybody. No, not yet. All right. We're going to load this thing up. We're going to go in about a few seconds here. Well, about 30 seconds. Or that's Andrew there. Our good friend Andrew right there. Gorgeous Tammy Finnegan. How are you? Thank you for joining us. You are live. And, remember, the Super Chat is a great way to support what we do here on a nightly basis. We appreciate the love. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell. And, of course, as Gorgeous Deanna's Vlogs has rolled into the studio, we are going to go live here in exactly 5 seconds. So I need a favor, because you're going to rock with me. We're going to get our horns up, and we're going to say, Mr. Bumblefoot, let's do it. From the mountains of central British Columbia to you listening around the world, this, my friends, is Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott, sitting in the captain's chair of SOR headquarters. We welcome you to tonight's show on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor. Hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot. Read Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Tonight's show is brought to you by Chive Charities. Help make the world 10% happier by visiting Chive Charities today. You can find them on our website. We got a good one for you tonight, ladies and gentlemen, as Debbie Felton, Professor Debbie Felton, Dr. Debbie Felton, has joined us tonight as we are going to talk about some weird ancient woo tonight. Yeah, that's where we're going. Yep, she is an author. She is a professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where she's been since 1999, teaching away at everything that goes into the interdisciplinary nature of her research. Folklore, classical literature. Yep, she is a smart one. She has also contributed to many books, including the Oxford Handbook of Monsters in Classical Myth. And we're going to get into things that we really don't talk about on this show. Serial killers from ancient times, ghost stories of ancient history. I'm telling you, we are going down a path for the first time here. This is virgin territory for what we are doing. And I'm actually kind of excited about this. I'm just going to shut up here. Bring on Debbie Felton. Welcome to Spaced Out Radio for the first time. How are you?
I'm okay, Dave. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we're glad you're here as well because, we're going to have a good time with this tonight. When we think paranormal, when we think supernatural, things weird, we don't go back to literally ancient history here to study that the weirdness has been happening since the creation of humankind, to be honest.
Yeah. I agree. I'm just, given your intro, I feel like I need to go out and find the ancient, Bigfoot now.
Please do. Please do. That would help me out a lot because maybe he would give you a tip of where I could go looking in the forest here. I need some Bigfoot time.
And, somebody did actually write a paper on UFOs in the ancient world.
No.
I wish it had been me, but it wasn't.
No. I got to ask you, as I want our audience to get to know you, we'll get into all the good stuff a little bit later in the show, but what really intrigues you about ancient history and the weirdness of it all?
Well, okay, that's a good question. I don't think anyone's ever actually asked me that exact question before.
I am a professional. I am a
Yes,
professional.
yes. And so the thing is that I think that my field, which is the field of classics, has this reputation for being like overly stodgy. And you think, oh, Cicero and political speeches, or unfortunately these days, my field tends to be associated with white supremacy, which is completely wrong, but we won't get into that right now. But what I wanted to do was show people that really there's a lot of sort of general public. I mean, there's just a lot of things that would interest the general public in terms of they're still going on today, like ghost stories or serial killer stories or monster stories. I mean, you think of like the monsters of Greek myth, like Medusa or Cerberus or whatever, but those in particular are still showing up in pop culture everywhere. So I just think it's important to make people realize that we're not just all about like dead white males and politics and and all of that so much as, there's what people might have called like folk belief or lowbrow literature. I don't like any of those terms particularly, but I think it's fun to look at some of the weirder stuff and let people know that, yes, there was this, 2,000 and 3,000 years ago also.
The paranormal has always been something that is very intriguing, and we can never tell where it started, where it began. Is it life after death? Is it from different timelines? Is it imagination? There are so many different theories that are out there about what the paranormal is. And the fact that, there are reports going back to ancient times regarding the supernatural phenomena, I'm wondering, like, how do you even start studying all of this? What led you down this path?
Oh, well, it's another tough question because what we think of as the supernatural or the paranormal was sort of, to a certain extent, thought of as part of everyday life back then because they were polytheistic societies. The Greeks and the Romans, they believed in multiple gods. A lot of things in nature that they couldn't explain by their science at the time, they would attribute to the gods. And it was more part of everyday life in a certain sense than maybe it is now. I mean, even people. There are a lot of people with different beliefs now. Believe in gods, different religions, and all of that. But things like showers of stones, for example, that we can now maybe explain by science, or a rain of frogs. They were swooped up by a microburst and dropped somewhere else. Those were the sorts of things that they thought were definitely paranormal or supernatural in antiquity. But we maybe have more rational explanations now. So there's a definite difference in terms of what they might have thought of as unusual. But sure, I mean, there were people that believed in life after death and spirits that couldn't cross over and needed to be at rest before they could cross over. And there were definitely the equivalent of serial mutilation murders and just all sorts of weird things, reports of odd things in the sky. As I said, somebody did actually write a paper on UFOs in antiquity. So there's all the same stuff. It was there thousands of years ago. That's all I'm trying to say.
If we look at classic Greek and Roman literature and history, there are a lot of cryptid type creatures that are in there.
Yep.
From goat men to what's the name? The animal with the bull head or the buffalo head, and then the human body.
The Minotaur.
Yeah, the Minotaurs and
Yeah.
everything like that. Were these creatures actually real, or were they something that was made out of, just somebody's imagination back then?
I think it depends who you talk to. If you talk to somebody like Adrienne Mayer, she will tell you that maybe some of them were based on dinosaur fossils or Ice Age mammal fossils, for example, like a Triceratops or a Protoceratops. Protoceratops could have inspired the griffin with its sort of hooked beak. But even some of the ancient Greeks thought that those hybrid creatures were ridiculous and that nature couldn't possibly produce anything like that because it wouldn't make sense. So there were rational explanations, again, even 2,000 years ago, as far as all of that goes. So I think, even antiquity, they were taking them sort of metaphorically as opposed to literally. And some of them definitely were trying to explain them away by saying, the Sphinx that kept killing the young men of Thebes was really just a robber bandit who would come down from the mountains and kill travelers on the way in and out of Thebes. So
were people more gullible back then? Or were in buying the story, whether it came from a politician or a religious icon in the time? Or were they more, open-minded because these creatures were a part of their society?
Well, the creatures were part of their lore for sure. I don't think people were any more gullible back then than they are now. And I think they told those types of stories for different reasons. Like there were certainly moral lessons in all of those myths, like don't show hubris, like understand your place in the universe and on Earth as a mere mortal, and don't get too big for your britches, or something bad's going to happen to you. So a lot of those creatures and the stories about them are related to themes like that, or they're related to the idea of like man getting control over the chaos of nature, because a lot of those monsters were sort of chaos monsters that were there from primeval times, and as man built a society, he sort of conquered them and took control over it and subdued all those creatures. So there's all this, allegorical, metaphorical interpretation of what those monsters are actually doing in those stories, as opposed to anybody believing that there really was such a creature as Medusa, for example, or the Chimera with its, snake, goat, various body parts. Yeah.
I want to ask you, in regards to yourself personally, when you decided to go down this path and learn about these really cool ancient stories that are all but forgotten, was there one particular story that really captivated you, that led you down this path?
There was, actually. It was a ghost story. So when I was still a student, one of my teachers had us read a haunted house story by an author called Pliny the Younger. And it was just a story he wrote in a letter to a friend of his, that we have his letters to his friends. And I still remember this because it was just the reason he had us read the story had nothing to do with the actual content of the story. This was in a Latin composition class. We were practicing writing in Latin so that we would understand Latin grammar better. And he thought that this particular story was a great example of different use of verb tenses. Meanwhile, I was reading the story going, there's a ghost rattling chains in here. Why are we talking about that? Why are we talking about the skeleton that was found in the courtyard? Why are we talking about verb tenses instead of this haunted house? So I decided to go off and investigate the haunted house story and find out whether there were more like it in the ancient world. And there were a bunch of other ghost stories also. But people were sort of skeptical about my doing research into that, because they were like, well, ghost stories, that's not serious scholarship.
No,
let's just say I had trouble getting a job.
I can see that. That's why you're a teacher today. But I'm teasing. I really am. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. But I want to ask you though. Did you always have an interest in the paranormal and supernatural? Was it something you grew up with? Were you a Comic-Con type kid or a sci-fi type kid growing up?
Well, I'm going to say yes to that. I mean, I don't know if Comic-Con was a thing when I was young, because that was a really long time ago. But I did grow up reading ghost stories and watching Star Trek and all those movies from the 50s with the, like giant insects like them, which was one of my favorites. And just all those UFO movies and monster movies from the 50s. And 60s, and reading a bunch of sci-fi in college and all that. So yeah, I've been interested since I was in grammar school.
Very cool. Okay, so the fact that you have an interest in these subjects, in your present day life, were you ever kind of hanging out and doing paranormal investigations or learning more about ghosts, or was this strictly about academia?
I would say it was more, I was interested in ghost stories, like as a literary genre. So yeah, it's kind of nerdy academic stuff, I guess, because I don't, personally, I find it hard to believe in ghosts, and I haven't had any experiences myself, which doesn't mean that it's not a possibility. It just means that it's difficult for me personally to get to the point of believing heavily in something like that. So I was interested in the stories that people told and why they told them. What kind of beliefs about the afterlife are they trying to tell us? And how long the similar types of stories have been around. I mean, the haunted house story that first got me interested, the Roman one that is, sounds just like any modern haunted house story, except that it's set in ancient Athens. Actually, if you didn't have the name Athens in there, you'd have trouble telling that it was a 2,000-year-old ghost story.
Okay, so let me ask you this then: if you have a tough time believing in the paranormal and supernatural, why do you find it so intriguing to study it?
I don't know. I mean, that's I'm not even sure I have a good answer for that. I like the atmospheres that are created in the literary ghost stories, but I also like urban legends, right? And I mean, just if there's a house that's supposed to be haunted, I think that's kind of neat, even if I can't sense the ghost or see the ghost myself. I like local ghost stories all over the world, and in addition to the literary ghost stories. But there's something about the atmosphere. What I don't like as much are in-your-face slasher movies, for example. So there's just something about the eerie and uncanny atmosphere of a lot of ghost stories, and the creepy settings, like, the deserted old mansion with too many rooms or that kind of thing, or the woman in white or whatever this is behind me, that's just a picture by a local artist. It's not specifically a woman in white or anything, but it's a ghost, in a stairway. So yeah, it's a little hard to tell. I've liked them since I was little, and it was my dad that got me interested in them. So there's probably like, oh, my dad liked them, I like them. So there's a family bond there too. Okay.
I'm going to get you to meet up with our weekend host, Lynn Wallington, because she's in Salem. And,
yeah. I was just there back in August.
I am so going to get you two to meet up, because she'll take you to some paranormal woo. She will take you right down that street, because I think it's intriguing. Like, here you are studying all of this, and you're still unsure on an educational level whether or not the paranormal is real. So do you believe in life after death or any type of different realms?
It's really tough for me to believe that. I mean, the idea of eternal non-existence is pretty terrifying, but yeah, I think I'm too much of a rationalist. I didn't grow up in a super religious household, so I didn't grow up, with the concepts of heaven or hell or eternal much of anything. So that may have something to do with why it's more difficult for me personally to feel strongly that there must be something. It'd be nice if there were something.
Do you want there to be something?
I don't know. Eternal anything is so tough a concept to grasp. I mean, you read all these stories about people who are offered eternal life and they don't accept it because it would be boring. It would take the meaning out of life. But if it's an afterlife, I don't know how you would deal with that same problem, really.
So are you saying then that you're going to ruin the dream of this show right now and say that there are no immortals walking this planet?
I'm not going to say that. I don't know for sure. You just asked me what I believed. I'm not saying that, I know, because I don't know.
What about aliens?
Yeah, that would be really cool, I guess, unless they're out to get us, which, if they're smart, they'll just stay away because, there's nothing for them here.
No, when you're going to deal with listeners like PBR in our chat room, it's obvious that they're going to look at that. They're going to turn right around and say, wrong place, wrong time. We got to get the hell out of here. No, but seriously, though, I mean, science is opening up, and you're an educator. You're somebody who is not only teaching but learning on a daily basis. But science is really starting to open up the grounds to the plausibility that there is some other type of phenomenon going on, whether it's extra-dimensionally, interdimensionally, whether it's coming from space, and where all of these different phenomena are happening. I mean, we look at the U.S. government right now, that they are going heavily into opening up an office about investigating UFO reports, not only by the military, but the public as well. I mean, when you look at this, does this not open a little bit of a supernatural Pandora's box for the 21st century?
Would it really be supernatural if it's just extraterrestrial life?
Not if it's all connected.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah. No, I mean, I certainly, personally, again, I absolutely do not rule out the possibility of extraterrestrial life. It seems like, oh, it's such a big universe. It just, what the chances of, us contacting it or it contacting us still seems kind of remote, but I know it's been more of a possibility recently with those reports. And I'm just like, are those probes from another planet, that the military are basically running into? I mean, we still don't know, but it's going to be interesting to find out.
What if they?
And also, it would be a good thing. It would be, I mean, again, it depends if they're out to destroy us, but it would be a good thing if there is more life out there, because it means that not all civilizations end up destroying themselves before they get a chance to go out and explore deep into space.
But what if they're already here?
Yeah, that's possible too. I'm not into the lizard people theory, but
oh, come on! You look like you'd enjoy a cocktail with some reptilians.
But, nothing wrong with the sort of Star Trek Prime Directive kind of approach.
Yes, and that's why we need more Captain Kirks out there who will take one for the
Picard,
team anyway.
I'm sorry, no. Don't start the Kirk versus Picard debate.
I'm going to just admit something to you right now. I'm 48 years old, and I have never watched an episode of Star Trek. I'm that guy.
Well, that's just disgraceful.
Talking about all this woo, and I've never seen Star Trek or Doctor Who or even the X-Files, ever.
Well, I'm older than you, and so I might have grown up with a little more of that. Like, I was actually a kid when Star Trek was on its first run, so
My goodness.
the original generation.
I would have never thought that. I would have never thought that.
Well, I'm not saying I watched it the first time around, but I was definitely alive when it was first on. I think I watched it in reruns, but yeah.
But do you believe, though, as we are progressing down this road, and we're going to get more into the history of everything with serial killers and of ancient times and strange mass deaths and plagues and everything that kind of goes along those lines, which I find kind of bizarre but still cool nonetheless. Do you think, though, that history repeats itself within civilizations?
Repeats itself in what sense?
Just in regards to, this is we're a violent society. We've
the rise and fall of empires?
Absolutely.
That kind of thing? Yeah, I'm afraid so. I think history repeats itself. I don't think we learn enough from the past. Yeah.
Do we forget the past too quickly?
I don't know if it's a question of forgetting so much as ignoring. But also, I'm not much of a historian, so I'm more of a literature person.
No, I understand. I understand that, but I'm just curious in regards to the whole aspect and idea of people, because when it comes down to it, no matter whether it's history, literature, music, or whatever, it always still comes down to people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that people can be slow to learn, myself included, and to take lessons from the past, or to be overconfident about thinking we can do it better or we can solve that problem that no one else has solved. And so we run into problems and we don't learn our lessons. And I think there's a confirmation bias that a lot of us have, that we're so very unwilling to accept other people's points of view as being possibly right. Like, why can't there be two differing opinions and their opinions? So that's okay, as opposed to one of them has to be right and one of them has to be wrong. So yeah, I think we run into a lot of trouble because of that.
Well, I mean, history shows that is a technique that we're really good at. We're really good at conflict.
Especially lately.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. By the way, you're not even Canadian and you're wearing plaid tonight. I'm offended.
I am. Well, I am in Massachusetts, so I'm only 4 hours away from Montreal. Plus, it's LL Bean country here. So I got my flannel. Yeah.
I bet you could cut a tree like anything. Dead tree. Dead tree.
Yeah, I don't think so. No, I wouldn't want to do that to a tree, They're our friends. We need them.
Not the dead ones. The dead ones cause forest fires.
That's true.
Got to get rid of them.
We could use some wood for the winter. Now that I think about it, I do have an axe in my garage. I just haven't used it in a while.
I got a wood splitter and a chainsaw.
Yeah, see, that's what I don't have. I have the axe, but not the wood splitter. So
Yeah, you need one. They're very
yeah,
good.
I do. Yeah, obviously, I'm using the axe for something else entirely. So
Exactly. Dr. Felton, we're going to get you to hold on right there because we are going to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. Dr. Debbie Felton of the University of Massachusetts Amherst. We're going to get into ancient serial killers and the stories behind them when we return on the mighty Spaced Out Radio. Let's have some fun tonight. Where legends rise, we find out tonight on SOR. Stay tuned. All right, big thanks. Stephen Mate, I always say thank you for the Super Chat donations. Always. I can show you. There's one. Right there. I've only got one tonight. There's one. And then when we come back, right before we come back from break, I will say thank you to everybody. Thank you. Kirk's blog, welcome to our chat room. Thank you. All right. So there. Yeah. Having fun yet? Deb?
are you talking to me?
Yes, you.
Oh yeah.
Good.
I'm stunned. Have you really never seen Star Trek?
I'm dead serious.
Oh my God. What's wrong with you?
I was too busy chasing down Sasquatch, seeing aliens, and running into ghosts in my house.
Okay, fair enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, seriously, and that's the truth of it all. No, I was never interested. You know, when growing up, I was I was into sports. I was I was always doing something. Wasn't watching a lot of TV.
Yeah.
You know, so
Well, that's probably better. I mean,
could be.
yeah.
Oh, look at Fap here. Is there nothing scarier than a Dave Scott wandering around the woods with an axe? And just remember, when I'm walking slowly, I will still catch up to you. Because that's the way it is in horror movies.
Well, that's because whoever you're chasing is going to trip over a tree root, right?
Exactly.
And maybe hurt their ankle and have to limp at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's real simple. If you're getting chased by a serial killer, don't look back. Just run. Just run.
Yeah, and maybe, run sideways. But the thing is that serial killers don't usually chase people. I mean, the slashers in the movies do. But, a serial killer is not generally going to chase you.
Mm-hmm. Big thank you, by the way, to Carla for the super chat. And a big thank you to Black Dragon for the super chat. And the lovely and talented Ben from UFO Garage for the amazing super chat as well. Guys are awesome.
What's a super chat?
It's a little button on the YouTube side that if people wish to donate to the show, they can.
Oh, that's nice to help keep it in production.
Yeah. Nicole says, do not run upstairs or into the basement. Never. Never. Look, jump out the window if you have to. Get a few glass cuts. That's okay. Just get away. I hate slasher films. Hate them.
Yeah, I actually am not a huge fan of that genre.
No. Mm-hmm.
I have to watch it on a small screen. If I watch it at all, I'm just watching it on my iPad or whatever.
I don't even watch it.
Yeah.
I don't even watch it. It's just, I used to. I really liked Pinhead from Hellraiser. Okay, I did.
I haven't seen that in ages.
Yeah. I really liked, by Nightmare on Elm Street #3, I was cheering on Freddy. Okay.
Well, I think you're kind of supposed to do that in the first place. I mean, some of them just have much more interesting personalities than the other characters.
Yeah. Now what really scares me is wondering how large our listener Fap's head really is. He runs a 4.4. Yeah, right. All you do is turn sideways with your head and jog, Fap. That's how you cross the finish line first. Yeah, I'm mean to my audience sometimes. All right, we have just under 1 minute here.
Yeah, the cats are still running around chasing each other.
That's okay. We allow cats around here. Well, let's see. There's my brother Eugene in Philadelphia. Love you, buddy. Let's see. Oh, that's not nice, Jeremy. That's not nice. We give Dave money and he shits on us. That's not nice. I'm sorry.
Well, you said you were being mean to them. So
I know. It just makes me feel bad now. Now my anxiety is full throttle. Thank you, Fabster, for the awesome super chat. Really appreciate it. Love you, man. All right, here we go. Second half hour of Spaced Out Radio is now underway. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you for joining us as we're broadcasting you from the snowy SOR headquarters in the mountains of British Columbia. Want to remind you that if you missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot. Read up on Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We are talking with Dr. Debbie Felton. She is a professor at University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and we are going to get into ancient serial killers. Yes, people were murderous back then. Sure, they may not have had machine guns. They may not have had anything else, but, nothing a little blade couldn't take care of. And, we're just going to get right into it tonight. Dr. Debbie Felton, welcome to Spaced Out Radio again.
Hey, thanks again for having me.
All right, let's get right into it. Monsters and Monarchs. You did a lot of work on this book, finding some of the worst cases of humanity throughout the ends of history. Tell us about what made you write this.
Well, okay. I mean, I was, I guess I have to go back a little bit to when I was growing up in Los Angeles in the 60s and 70s, and the news was just full of serial killers at that point. It seems to have been like the heyday of serial killers, because we had, the Manson family, which was more of a spree killing almost, but still well planned. But there was also there were the Hillside Stranglers. There was the Zodiac Killer in Northern California. There was Ted Bundy. They were just all over the place. So I just feel like my childhood was sort of like, steeped in all of these kind of icky stories. And so I guess I was familiar enough with stories about serial killers that so one day I was just reading a story from ancient Greece, and I was like, well, this kind of sounds like a serial killer. And nobody had ever really talked about serial killers as an ancient thing. Most of what I was reading about modern serial killers said that, it's a phenomenon of modern society and how decadent we all are, and how, people aren't, like mental health is an issue and people aren't taken care of. And just too much freedom and capitalism and all that. So I realized that, that's maybe not the best way to look at it, since clearly there were serial killers much earlier. And, certainly there were people who had already looked into earlier serial killings, like France and Germany of the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries. Countess Elizabeth Bathory, for example, who bathed in the blood of virgins to keep herself young, that kind of thing. And there were cannibal clans, in the pre-modern Europe. But it turns out, if you look carefully enough at some of these stories from ancient Greece and Rome, they certainly sound like serial killer stories, even if they didn't have like the phrase, or like they didn't have a word for serial killer. I mean, we didn't even have that terminology until like the 1980s or something. So it was, but the descriptions of the kind, what was going on sound a lot like modern serial killings.
No kidding. No kidding. So when we go back in classical antiquity like this, who stands out for you? Because when I look at history, I think of all of these bloodbaths that we heard of back in the day, because there was a lot of war, there was a lot of tribal warfare back then.
Yeah. So I think that there are lots of different kinds of killings. So, I mean, there's killing during wartime. There are mass killings, spree killings, and serial killing is a little different. There's a sort of a pattern. I mean, this is all sort of a more pop culture, like Criminal Minds TV series approach to serial killing. But there are patterns that people look for. Like, was there evidence in like earlier in life that you're dealing with somebody who doesn't value human life? Do they torture small animals? Do they set fires? Do they wet the bed? That kind of thing. And then as they get older, do they develop, an alcohol or other drug problem? Do they start committing more violent crimes like assault and battery or rape before they finally, turn into a full-fledged serial killer who might... Again, there's so many different types just of serial killer, but is it a mutilation murder? Is it a serial poisoning? What are we looking at here? So there are a lot of different kinds of serial killing, but we're not necessarily talking about, the equivalent of shooting up a movie theater or something like that. That's different. That's mass murder, and the FBI actually classifies those differently. If you're asking if there's a particular person who stands out as an example, I could throw the Emperor Nero at you, I guess. I think Nero has probably been much maligned unfairly. There are certainly books these days that are trying to rehabilitate Nero and say, well, he wasn't so bad after all. And I think certainly the sources that we have from the ancient world are very biased against Nero. They freaking hated him. So the question isn't so much whether he was a serial killer as that people liked to portray him as one to kind of, tear him down, basically. But he did, according to the historians, he did exhibit these problems as a child and got worse and worse as he got older. So he seems to follow the, like I say, the sort of typical pattern of a serial killer that you hear about, at least in pop culture versions, but also a little bit in terms of what the FBI crime classification manual has to say about it.
Was there any study of psychopathy back then?
You mean contemporary with the time period?
Yes.
It wasn't. I wouldn't say that there was anything like what we would consider specifically studying someone's mental state and mental illness. I mean, actually, that's not fair, because there are some medical texts that did study insanity, and there's a lot of new work being done on that. But in terms of psychopathy specifically, I think there's still a lot of work to be done. And this is the thing with Nero, that his psychopathy or the psychology that they look at that's presented in the sources, even if it's not recognized as psychology, it still says, oh, he had an absent father, an abusive mother, cold, uncaring mother, was always trying to win her approval. So the sources actually say that. They're like, he kept trying to get, his mother's attention, and she just didn't pay him attention, and so he acted out. So we do have these descriptions in some of the ancient historians of characters like Nero that, I mean, I wouldn't say they're trying to explain or excuse the behavior, but they are noticing that there were issues. So there was no field of psychology back then, but there are descriptions that we can use a little bit of to sort of say, oh, well, look, there's that pattern that sounds familiar.
All right. So if we go back to ancient Greece, were there any, I guess finding a serial killer or somebody along those lines would be tough, because the investigative techniques were so primitive back then.
Yeah, there wouldn't even be much of an investigation, really. I mean, there was no police force, there were no forensics, right? I mean, there were no fingerprinting, nothing like that, no being able to trace poisons. And so basically, unless you had witnesses or you actually found something in someone's house that indicated, yeah, they're the ones who killed the neighbor, there wasn't sort of criminal investigation the way we think of it. There was, again, no police. It was sort of neighborhood watch was really more what you had. And so there's another example from a little later than Nero where someone has basically been caught and put on trial for being a highway murderer. And that was actually an issue in the Roman Empire, were just highway bandits. The Roman Empire was so vast that there would be these bands of bandits, sorry, who would rob travelers, sometimes kill them. But this particular case, which I should say is a fictional case, but evidently based on some real cases, in this instance, it's one person who was not working as part of a band of robbers. And he didn't just rob and kill people. He absolutely mutilated their bodies and in a lot of cases hid them so that people didn't even know what had happened to their relatives. And he just happened to slip up and be caught finally. And the prosecution speech in this sample case says things like, nobody would have thought that he was capable of such crimes. He was so mild-mannered and polite, in public, sort of like but my neighbor was so nice. I didn't think he had like 15 bodies buried in his basement. So the stereotype of the, nice neighbor was there, 2,000 years ago also. And the description continues with, well, you know what? You know how he ended up like this? He got away with a bunch of crimes when he was younger, but realize now that he was the one who committed all those robberies and he committed rape and he, stole things. And because he got away with all that, he has turned into the murderer that we now know him to be. So, again, this sort of pattern, a little bit of the psychological background without actually calling it a psychological background as far as the ancient sources go. And just an awareness that serial mutilation murder did happen and that the highways were often a place where it happened if it was going to happen. Because just like today, it's so much easier to get away with it when people are out traveling and you're out on the road also. It's a lot harder to find the bodies. It's a lot harder to trace back who did it.
Oh, I understand all too well. My town where I live is actually the start at the beginning of the Highway of Tears.
Oh my God! Okay, I was wondering if that's where you were going with that. Yeah. So that's the Canadian one where there were so many people vanished, and it looks like more than one person was responsible for, there were so many people that vanished and they seem to have pinned it on one person, but then there's other ones that they think someone else might have done, if I'm remembering that one right. Yeah,
they believe it's multiple people, but the weird part about it is it's still going on. Mm-hmm. That's the problem that they're having right now, is trying to figure out, okay, if we've linked this person to say 4 bodies, this person to 8. Yeah. They believe that it could be long haul truckers who are doing it, especially making the hauls into Alaska.
Yeah. No, that's the problem with the roads, down. Sorry, a cat.
That's okay. Cats are allowed.
With the road, the highway murders in the U.S. also, so many of the killers are named after the roads where the bodies are found, like the I-94 killer or whatever, or the Green River killer, because the bodies were found all along the road by the Green River. And the FBI started the really poorly named Serial Killers Highway Initiative. It's sort of like, are you trying to encourage them to go out and kill on the highways? Is that what you mean with a name like that? But the point is that the FBI realized that a lot more had to be done to pay attention to what was going on the highways in terms of that being a ground for serial killers.
Very true, very true. Professor Debbie Felton is here tonight on Spaced Out Radio, Ancient Serial Killers. I've been looking up some, leading up to this show. I was looking up some. In Greek mythology, there was a gentleman named Procrustes who was claimed to be a serial killer, a rogue smith and bandit. Superficial charm to charm the ladies and the men. Nobody ever suspected him of doing anything woeful and mad, but here he was, one of the most prolific serial killers of the time. What do we know about him?
Not a lot. I think you've actually said more than our ancient sources actually have to tell us. So he's certainly he's a character from myth. But again, part of the issue seems to be that some of these characters in myth are based on actual people or actual crimes. We're never going to be able to prove it. But Procrustes is an especially good example because he's another one of these sort of roadway bandits, but he doesn't roam the way that some of them do, like on horseback or whatnot. Procrustes had a little home off the side of the road there. And what he would do is he would look for vulnerable travelers who were tired. It was miles, to the next city. And people who were traveling on this road were particularly vulnerable if they were traveling by themselves. So he seemed to target lone travelers, usually men. Well, to be fair, women weren't out on the roads by themselves back then. But anyway, so he would approach somebody on the road and say, "You look tired. I got a house back here, for a small sum. I'll give you dinner and a bed." And, he, like you said, he seemed friendly enough, nice enough, just wanted a little bit for his bed and breakfast, basically. And the traveler would go back with Procrustes to his little house. And the problem was that once they got there, Procrustes would tie the man to the bed. And if his limbs were too long for the bed, Procrustes would chop them off or saw them off, a saw or an axe. And if the limbs were too short for the bed, Procrustes would take this giant mallet and hammer out the legs so that they became, the bones broke and you could just stretch the legs out to fit the bed. So he either had two different beds or one bed and made everybody fit. There are multiple versions of the story. So this is the neat thing about Greek myths is there are variant versions of some of the smaller stories. So, but anyway, Procrustes is interesting because of his methods. He's a specific modus operandi, and he had a specific ritual with the bed and the limbs there. And he had what we could consider a murder kit, which is clearly he had a set of tools that he used regularly for this sort of thing. Just like Ted Bundy had a murder kit in his car when they caught him in his little VW Bug finally roaming around. So, murder kit is, again, a sort of pop culture way of putting it. But, I'm going to go with Dexter as another example. He's a fictional one, of course, but since his show has just been revived, Dexter New Blood, Dexter, had his whole trunk full of killing implements, including the tarp that he would put out and his little surgical instruments there and all that. So, Procrustes is interesting because we can point to the murder kit, among other things.
Definitely. Now, if we go over to Roman times, we're looking at Locusta. I mean, let's just have a little bit of poison. I'll throw it in your tea. Right. Don't worry about it. I got you covered. Literally.
Yeah. So Locusta is interesting because she's from Gaul, which was not Roman. I mean, she wasn't Roman. It was a province they had taken over. But Locusta, it was called Locusta of Gaul, meaning that she was sort of a foreigner, like she wasn't a Roman, per se. So, but she was renowned as a poisoner, and she's contemporary with Nero, actually, who hired her to poison some people for him. And so the question with Locusta, because she does show up in encyclopedias of serial killers. Again, some of these encyclopedias are trying to find earlier examples rather than just assuming it's modern. And the thing with Locusta is that she was an assassin for hire. And so it's kind of a sticky question, like, is it fair to call her a serial killer when she was an assassin for hire? Are assassins for hire just serial killers who find an outlet the way that, Dexter sort of did by killing worse criminals? Up for debate there. But so we don't know if Locusta actually killed anyone herself, like who was a personal enemy, because the ancient sources say, well, she provided poison to people like Nero or Nero's mother, Agrippina, who then used it to kill the Emperor Claudius, supposedly by poisoning his mushrooms. But she's a fascinating figure because she was so infamous, even in her own time, as a poisoner. And the problem was that once Nero died, his successor was not so enamored of Locusta and had her executed for her crimes of poisoning people or providing poison to people.
Were there a lot of female serial killers back in that time?
It's a little hard to tell. There were several what we would probably call mass poisonings that were where women were accused, like women or groups of women were accused of poisoning. And so with some of those, it's like, well, is it a mass murder or a serial poisoning? But it's still interesting to see that, hey, several hundred people were poisoned and this group of women is being accused for various reasons. There were individuals. There were individual women who were accused of poisoning. There were men who were accused of poisoning. And it was usually for political, jockeying for political power or possibly for an inheritance. So there are several examples here and there. Poison was especially popular, I guess, because it was relatively easily attainable and pretty much untraceable, other than the effects that it had on a person. But you couldn't necessarily prove who administered it and when, that kind of thing.
That's just, it's grotesque in a way.
It
really is, because back then life wasn't. We always get the impression, looking back on history, that life wasn't as meaningful as it is today. It was about getting to that next level of the gods and hanging out with them.
Well, yeah, I think there were just as many different beliefs back then about the afterlife as there are now. So not everybody necessarily believed in an afterlife back then. Some people did, there were a lot of debates about the nature of the soul in relation to the body. Does the soul survive the body and go off on its own? Is there reincarnation? Certainly there were some people who believed in reincarnation of the soul, or that the soul could attain higher levels, or that it would have an afterlife in Hades somewhere, because Hades was a place of punishment for sins, but also of rewards for leading a good life. So there were just so many different beliefs. So it's a little hard to tell who believed what. Some of them say specifically what they believe, but others don't actually go into it necessarily.
Very understandable.
Yeah. And so in terms of valuing life, the appeal of some of the mystery cults in the Roman Empire, like the cult of Isis, for example, or the cult of Mithras, or Christianity, part of the appeal there was that you could have a better life after this one. So people who were dissatisfied with this life found mystery cults very appealing for that reason, because they did promise a life after death for the soul, some kind of existence after this. But in general, people seem to have shared a lot of the same feelings that we do now. And this is one of the reasons why people still read something like the Odyssey, because people can actually relate to a lot of what's going on a personal level there. Odysseus is a very realistic hero in some ways. He meets a lot of monsters, but he doesn't have any superpowers, like Achilles or Heracles. Odysseus is a very mortal sort of hero in a lot of ways, and he's terrified in a lot of situations, and he makes a huge number of mistakes and gets people killed. And he has to learn gradually how to be better, be a better leader, and be a more cautious person, and all sorts of just personal growth throughout the Odyssey. And so, that the Odyssey still resonates with us because we can relate to a lot of what's going on there. So it isn't that they necessarily all felt that life was hard and difficult and didn't have as much meaning, so much as that they valued the lives of their fellow citizens more than they valued the lives of foreigners or slaves, enslaved peoples, for example. So I
guess that's one way to put it.
Yeah. And they did have homicide laws. They developed different kinds of homicide laws over time, but they never recognized what we would call serial murder as a separate thing.
Interesting, because when you go through history, you look at people like Vlad the Impaler, who was absolutely beloved by his people, even though he terrorized them. But there was somebody who would mock the other countries that were trying to invade, or other armies that were trying to invade. Genghis Khan did along the exact same lines as well. There's a lot of bloodshed that has gone on in regards to this, but we're going to have to wait on that, because we got to go to break at the top of the hour.
Sure.
Hard to believe we're already an hour into this show. This show is cruising right along tonight. Dr. Debbie Felton from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, and we are talking serial killers of ancient times. What were they thinking? Why was there so much bloodshed? Did they even care who they were actually murdering at that time? Slaves, innocent people, women, men. Did it really matter? Yes, we are a violent society going back a few years, right through to today. No wonder we always have troubles. Gives me shivers just thinking about it.
It's depressing.
It is. It is. Dr. Debbie Felton on Spaced Out Radio. We continue with Hour 2 next. And we're clear. That's fun times. Fun times. Are you standing?
I am standing. You wonder why I'm moving around so much?
Well, I thought maybe you were giving us a little jig or a dance or something.
No, I just spend too much time sitting, so I try to, I'm at the computer way too freaking much in terms of the work that I have to do, including teaching prep and grading, and I just got to stand up sometimes.
I don't blame you.
The space that I have here is not super conducive to sitting, so just as well. I hope I'm not making anybody seasick by.
No, I'm not at all.
Yeah, I'm just like switching off feet here, and
that's okay. You're allowed. But
I'm going
to tell you right now, if you sit down, we're not going to be able to see you.
I know. You can see the top of my head.
Perfect. That's all we need. That's all we need. That's good times. Good times. Are you having fun so far?
Sure. I think this is my 13th interview since mid-August. So I'm starting to get used to it.
Awesome. Awesome.
And I'm not a super formal person, so.
Now I can't wait till at the bottom of the next hour we're going to get into some serious woo with you.
Uh-oh.
We're going to get into some serious woo. We're going to mess you up.
Oh, great, because I'll be like barely conscious by then.
Perfect. You're gonna go to work.
It's another reason for me to stand up. So I don't.
You're gonna go to work on Monday, and you're gonna be like, "This idiot Canadian was just." I still got a headache.
No. I know what I'm getting myself into with some of these. There's been some. Paranormal Karen had me on, and what was it? California Haunts.
I don't know any of them.
Yeah, no. There's just up and down the West Coast. There's there's just all sorts of interesting stations and podcasts, and I don't know how. I think was it Klaus? Klaus?
Klaus.
Yeah, Klaus. Okay, he I guess had come across L'Acusta of Gaul and did some research and stumbled across my book that way.
Yeah,
because I'm not sure how some of these people ended up. Some of these podcasts and radio stations ended up hearing about me because the press that published my book doesn't do any publicity, and I don't. The university didn't put out anything, and I may have contacted a couple of people just who were friends, but
we found you nonetheless.
Yeah,
Klaus is a digger. He's from
awesome.
He's from Edmonton. He's used to digging in the tundra. So.
By the way, how much snow do you have?
About 1.5 inches right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think we've had some flurries, but I don't think we're going to get too much yet.
A little bit higher up in the elevation, there's about 3 inches.
Wow.
So it's starting.
Yeah.
It's starting. The snow I have here now will be here in April.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We're at that point
I guess
now.
That's a long time. We have sometimes had some that's lasted through about the end of March, and I think we've even had flurries in early April, but not that much on the ground usually by then.
Yeah, no, right now, we're about to get cold. And then in February, the cold hits, as it does for you guys. Except you get that ocean wind, too.
We're pretty far. We're probably 120 miles inland. So
Oh, then you're not getting it.
yeah, no, Boston gets it, but our winters have not been that severe. It's the whole climate change thing. We've had a lot more rain the last few years than anything else, and it's it snows so much less frequently than it did 20, 30 years ago. On the other hand, I'm from Los Angeles, so I didn't even see snow falling until I was like 20 or something when I started traveling.
Here, it apparently going back like 15 years, it was nothing to have like 5, 6 feet of snow. Now,
Wow, feet.
yeah. Now we'll get increments, so it'll go up to about 2.5 feet, 3 feet, then it melts down,
Yeah.
and then we'll get another big hit, and then it melts down, and then we get another big hit, and then in February it all freezes because it gets
Ugh.
really cold here to -40 Fahrenheit.
Wow,
And
we get maybe -8, -10 at the most, and that's unusual.
That's t-shirt weather.
Yeah.
Weather, you know.
Yeah.
But no, otherwise it February's the month I hate. And then all of a sudden one day you wake up and it's like 10 degrees warmer. And then the next day it's like another 5 degrees warmer. And you're like, it's still like -10 out, but you're running outside with like no jacket on because your body's acclimated to like -25, -30
Oh
Celsius.
man, imagine being acclimated to that.
Oh yeah.
I was actually I was in the Arctic Circle a couple of years ago, and what was really disturbing was that it was about 10 degrees warmer there than it was back here at the time. I was there in freaking January, in the Arctic Circle, and it was about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. But
Pole
it was
shift. Pole shift.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on right there.
Yeah.
I want to say a big thank you to Fabster, Black Dragon, Carla, and Ben for the amazing super chats. We really do appreciate the love and support through the super chat on this show. Thank you to all our new subscribers tuning us in for the first time. Don't forget to hit subscribe and ring the bell so you know we're on 7 days a week. Here we go with hour 2 right now.
You're listening to Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott. Follow Dave on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show.
Let's do this. Hour number 2 of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. Hello to everyone listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America, digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor. Hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Latificate. Latificate is your password. Use it wisely, space travelers, as the Clam sets the password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot, reading up on Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue on tonight talking about some of the worst serial killers in ancient history. Professor Debbie Felton, Dr. Debbie Felton from the University of Massachusetts Amherst joins us tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks again for having me. And I don't stress the doctor or the professor.
I know.
It's fine. It took me 7 years
good
to earn a PhD, but whatever.
Look, it just sounds good. More pro on our end. So I hope you don't mind.
No, I'm just messing with you.
That's all right. The most I'll ever be is Dave. That's it. That's it. Not Dr. Dave, not Professor Dave. Dave. Just simple. Yeah. So anyways, moving on. Right before the break, we mentioned Vlad the Impaler. We mentioned Genghis Khan. And there have been a lot of people who just want to kill everybody. Anybody what's the difference in a mind frame between, say, a leader like Genghis Khan back in the day who, there was no surrendering. Like, if you were an enemy, you were dead.
Yeah.
Comparatively to what, a serial killer would be, because isn't there the same type of lunacy in both?
Oh, here's where I have to say that I don't have a background in psychology or criminology, but still, there's definitely something a little different going on there. And this I can bring Nero back here too, because when we talk about Nero, who's an emperor of Rome, right? And I'm saying that they characterized him as a serial killer. So what's going on here? Aren't serial killers supposed to sort of be private? Aren't they supposed to just pick off one or two at a time? What is with these mass killings and conquest and paranoia about other people, being a threat to your power and having to get rid of any possible, usurpers or enemies? So, I think you'd actually have to ask a psychologist what exactly is going on with the mindset there. But there are some clear differences. And I think it has to do with, if you look at what the FBI has to say about serial killers, their motivations seem to be very different. It's not a question of getting public power, for example, and having power over a lot of people. It's to terrorize and have power over one or two people at a time. And for somewhat different reasons, again, they're not looking to control territory or set themselves up as rulers over a lot of people. It's and they're also not constantly at it necessarily. They have these cooling off periods in between murders that can be, hours or days or weeks or months or even years sometimes. The BTK killer, actually, Dennis Rader, it's like nothing happened for 10 years. And he finally wrote a letter to the police like he wanted to be caught because he just was like, well, doesn't anybody care that I did this? So it's very strange sometimes the way that they end up getting caught. Sometimes it's because they just wrote letters to the authorities. But anyway, back to your question, which is that there do seem to be really different motivations and goals, like the objectives or goals of the people like Vlad the Impaler or Genghis Khan in terms of conquest and power are really different from the serial killers' sort of laser focus on just individuals. And even if they're random individuals, what do they represent to the serial killer? Some serial killers do kill for profit. Others just are compelled to kill, or they have a sudden need, or well, not a sudden, but they have a need to feel dominance. But once that need is fulfilled, they don't feel it again for a while, so they can wait. Some of them are killing people who remind them of their abusive mother, for example. There's definitely a lot of misogynistic serial killers there. And they tend to have certain victim types too. So, for example, somebody might go after women who remind him of his mother, or Jack the Ripper went after prostitutes, and we still don't know why. There's a big famous unsolved serial killer case for you, just like Zodiac. And then some of them go after brunettes, some of them go after young men. Jeffrey Dahmer, for example, had a very strange motivation. He wanted to try to see if he could make these young men into his sex slaves. So he would lure them back to his house, and he would experiment on them. He'd drill into their brains to see if he could just sort of lobotomize them somehow. And so there are all sorts of quirky, shall we say, reasons why some of the serial killers did what they did and do what they do, as compared to massive conquest and the desire for power, very visible power, and public power.
For your writing then of monsters and monarchs, serial killers, and classical myth and history, I know you're not a psychologist, but did you really have to study up on the serial killers of this century in the past in order to try and figure out the attitudes of those in mythology?
Well, yeah, I mean, I did. I mean, I wouldn't, I definitely don't consider myself an expert on serial killers, modern serial killers, at least, especially. But I did have to look at cases. And one of the reasons it took me so long to write this book is that it's really disturbing material. I mean, I didn't necessarily, enjoy reading some of these books about these serial killers with the graphic pictures that some of them include of, eviscerated bodies and all that. So it was kind of slow going sometimes because this is not fun stuff. Pop culture versions like Criminal Minds make it sound like there's a serial killer around every corner. And they make a big deal out of it. Like it's, I don't know, something like maybe 1% to 3% of murder is serial killing, at least that we know of. I mean, there's probably a lot of unsolved serial murder out there, but it's definitely not as frequent as pop culture would, makes it seem. So yeah, I mean, I again, because I grew up hearing news about a lot of these modern serial killers, I went into some of them in more detail. Like I read more about them than I had heard about initially, and got a few more details to work with in terms of what I could look for in the ancient stories, like a murder kit. That hadn't occurred to me with Procrustes until I was reading more about Ted Bundy and about Peter Sutcliffe, who was called the Yorkshire Ripper. He had a murder kit that looks, it had a saw, it had a hammer. It was like, oh, Procrustes. So, yeah.
Nice and clean. Keep it nice and clean with those tools.
The similarities were just kind of striking, I think.
What did religion play as a factor in all of this?
I'm not sure that the stories tell us enough about that. There is a certain ritualistic aspect to a lot of serial killing, ancient and modern. But in terms of the ancient stories in particular, there's not a connection with religion that's particularly blatant or stated in the stories at all. It has more to do with, I think, what I was saying regarding Nero and regarding that other case that Nero had the absent father, the abusive, cold mother, and just ended up with sort of warped sensibilities about what affection was and how to get it and how to control it, say, for example. So you don't, in the ancient stories at least, you don't really see a lot of aspects of religion so much as ritual, maybe separate from religion.
Well, that leads to a lot of cases where a lot of ancient religions believed in human sacrifice.
Well, not so much with the Greeks and Romans, I think. Maybe in Mesoamerica. But the evidence for human sacrifice in ancient Greece is highly contested. It's very sparse and highly contested, and dates it dates farther back than, say, 5th century Greece, which is what most people think of when they think of ancient Greece, is, the Parthenon and the age of Pericles and the Persian Wars and the Peloponnesian Wars. So what evidence there is contested and a lot earlier than what you normally think of when you think of ancient Greece, I think. So that's a tough one. Yeah.
All right. Tell us about Heracles and the headhunters.
Okay. So there you've got shades of human sacrifice a little bit, maybe. We still don't know what's going on with some of those stories, but those do date to a lot earlier than the stories that we've been talking about so far. So Heracles, the famous strongman of Greek myth, whose father was the god Zeus, he's famous for his 12 labors, right? So he kills the Nemean lion. He goes to the end of the world and gets the golden apples of the Hesperides. He goes down to Hades and gets Cerberus. But in between and after all of those 12 labors, he has other adventures, like these side adventures. And a lot of those are encounters kind of like the one that Theseus had with Procrustes. So these people who sound like serial killers because they kill people passing through their territory, and they kill them by the same method, whether it's challenging them to a wrestling match that they know they're going to win and that the people don't want to wrestle them and they're forced to, or literally butting heads, like smashing someone to death with your own skull at butting. So there were a lot of, these odd, more minor characters in the Hercules, or Heracles, the Greeks called him, that sound like early versions of serial killer stories. And there are at least a few of them there where the killers take the skulls of their victims as trophies. So we've got this trophy taking aspect that shows up in modern serial killing too. And what they do with those skulls is they build shrines to their fathers. So, and the fathers of a lot of these characters in myth that far back, their fathers tended to be gods. So it's a little unclear why they thought that skull shrines were the way to appease the god Poseidon, say. And what's really different about those stories in terms of the skull taking is that, sure, there are people who take the skulls of their enemies in wartime. Like the Scythians took the skulls of their enemies, made drinking cups out of them, etc. But that was a sort of, wartime ritual. Like you've slain your enemies and here are your trophies for that. And it's done as a community sort of ritual. When you've got somebody who's an individual doing it, taking these skulls and then just piling them up, it's definitely an entirely different sort of dynamic and a different theme in terms of what it might represent. Wow. So I think that sounds like what you were asking about.
Yes. All right, back to your book here for a second. If people want to check it out, Monsters and Monarchs, Serial Killers in Classical Myth and History. We were just talking about Heracles and the headhunters. I'm curious in regards to murderous Greek roof tiles and other legal problems. What's going on here?
So there's a chapter in the book that sort of talks about, well, what kind of murder did the Greeks observe and recognize and have laws about? And the ancient Greeks, I mean, they took murder seriously. It was a heinous crime, at least if it was against a fellow Greek citizen. And they had several different law courts. And, one or two of them were for murder, and then other ones were for odd kinds of murders. So, for example, if a roof tile fell off of a building and killed somebody below, the roof tile would be put on trial in a specific court that they had for that purpose. And then if found guilty, the roof tile would be exiled by being thrown over the border into the neighboring county, basically. So the point of that, I mean, it sounds silly to us, but the point of that was to acknowledge the family's loss and at least hold something responsible for the death. And it was a symbolic gesture that was intended to help acknowledge a loss. It was a terrible accident. And it's not like they blamed the builder of the roof or anything like that. It was the tile came loose and it was nobody's fault, but it did kill somebody. So it needs to be put on trial. Not that this happened often, but evidently it happened often enough that they did have a separate court for it.
I don't know where to go with that.
I'm with you there. I'm like, interesting concept. But they did take murder very seriously. And it was actually the ancient Athenians, as far as we know, who came up with what we now think of as like different degrees of murder. I mean, they didn't call it that, but they basically said, here's intentional pre-planned murder, and that's a particularly bad kind. Oh, but you killed somebody as a crime of passion. That's slightly less bad because you just lost your temper. And, oh, you didn't mean to kill them at all. It was friendly fire, like you were in battle and you accidentally put your spear through your fellow soldier instead of the enemy. So they actually recognized a lot of different kinds of murder back in ancient Athens, like basically 6th, 5th century Athens. They were already differentiating with intent. It was the intent that was important to them. And that was a pretty significant development as far as the history of law goes, to differentiate intent, especially for when homicide, like literally the killing of a person. And so they break homicide down into these different intents, which we now call like first degree murder, manslaughter, etc.
Was that not also the beginning of lawyers and prosecutors as well?
That's an interesting question, because they didn't really have lawyers and prosecutors the way that we think of them. What you would have is speechwriters who would write speeches and sometimes maybe deliver them to prosecute someone or to defend somebody. So you might have a politician like Cicero in the law court. This is Rome now, not Greece. But he would give defense speeches or prosecution speeches. And it was often done on behalf of the families of the plaintiffs or the defendants. So there weren't like law firms, for example. There weren't people who specialized in doing this. They were generally also doing something else as part of their career, like Cicero, who was a politician and rhetorician and orator, and sadly a very bad poet, along with all the other things that he did. So it was a little different in that respect. And like I said, they didn't have police forces per se. They did have jails. They had guards at the jails, that kind of thing. But they didn't have everything in place that we would think of in terms of police, lawyers. They had courts, but the juries would sometimes be huge, like 501 people, for example, to make sure you had a tiebreaker. So not just 12 people, but often hundreds.
What about serial killers who stalked and murdered children? Like today, they are pariahs of society. They're even pariahs in the criminal society.
Yeah. Sadly, it does look like that's another crime that's just gone on for, thousands of years. The instances from antiquity aren't as clear cut as some of the cases that we've already talked about with the adults and Nero or the law courts. So as far as evidence for pederastic serial killer, killing of children and or killing of children with sexual motivation behind it, deaths of children were often attributed to witches. And this was sort of a blanket explanation for the deaths of children. If there was something equivalent to, say, sudden infant death syndrome, they would blame it on witches, because they didn't know why the kid had died in its crib. But more disturbing was when they found the bodies of dead children and the bodies were maybe mutilated. And so they would say a witch must have killed the child and used its body parts in magic spells. So we do have evidence like that, like an epitaph, in fact, for a young child who says, "I was killed by a witch's hand." Why would they think it was a witch if it was a 5-year-old kid? Well, the implication is that there was a mutilated body found with some bits missing. And in terms of the stories of witches in antiquity, they definitely were described as using children's body parts in magic spells. And there's another one where some witches kill a young boy. They bury him in the ground up to his neck, and they starve him to death so that they can use his liver in a magic spell, a love spell, actually. So the witches were characterized in antiquity, and this again goes down the centuries. They were characterized as finding the body parts of children as particularly useful in magic spells because the bodies were pure, etc. So the question is, were there actual practicing witches who did stuff like that? Whether their magic was efficacious or not is not the issue. It's, did they think themselves to be witches and try things like this? Or are we really looking at stories about serial killers of children, and they're just attributed to witches? Because how could a seemingly normal person or fellow human being actually do something like that? So those stories are hard to interpret because we don't have anything specific saying, here was a man who killed a bunch of children. We have, the mutilated bodies of children were found and it must have been witches, but was it really?
Was there a lot of kidnapping of children back then too?
A lot. I don't know. I mean, you definitely had cases where children of rich folk could be held for ransom, and then they'd be ransomed, and they'd pay the money. So in terms of so something like the Lindbergh baby, where kidnapped supposedly for ransom but found dead anyway. I don't know of a lot of cases or any specifically like that. But that doesn't mean there aren't any. It just means I didn't find everything. There's a huge body of ancient literature, and I think there absolutely are more stories out there than I found. So there's definitely somebody else could go and do more work on it. I could do more work on it, but there's not as much, I think, in that area as there have been, say the last couple of centuries.
All right, we've got 90 seconds to go before we got to go to break. At the bottom of the hour, Dr. Debbie Felton is here talking ancient serial killers. And in regards to children, because this is always such a brutal topic, even going back then, I just can't believe that, a lot of these were blamed on witches for the sake of ritual sacrifice. I mean, that just grosses me out thinking about that.
Well, It's still done in some countries and societies around the world. Children are still killed for body parts. So I collect newspaper articles, and there have been cases in the last 5 years from various parts of the world where, yes, a young girl was found missing some organs because they were thought to be used in a charm to help somebody gain riches, for example.
Oh my goodness!
So it still happens. It still happens.
Unbelievable that type of grotesque thought is still being practiced today. It is.
Yeah, they do get prosecuted though when they're caught. So it's not like they get away with it, but still,
there's an entire child trafficking business out there on the dark
Absolutely.
web that is just disgusting, and I don't even know what to say about that, because as a parent, I go from 0 to 500 in like less than a second on that. But we're going to change topics when we come back on Spaced Out Radio with Dr. Debbie Felton. Ancient ghost stories. We're getting into that next. She has a great book about it called Haunted Greece and Rome, Ghost Stories from Classical Antiquity. Oh yeah, this is a great night on Spaced Out Radio. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. We'll be back right after this. All right. Very cool. I'm just going to quickly step away and go to the bathroom. I'll be right back, okay?
I'll do the same thing.
All right, there we go. Now I can breathe. I think she's chasing her cats around. Hello, I'm back.
What? I don't know. Oh, I see. Okay. Apparently, I had these on the wrong way.
Oh, there you go.
Apparently, one of them says right and one of them says left. Why? What difference does it make?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Whatever.
Hi, the Michael Leger. You know, it is that time again, ladies and gentlemen, where if you ever want to piss off a Dutch person, what you do is you ask them for a discount. Yes, Gary the Dutchman, owner of Mighty Moose Beard Oil, hates it when our audience uses our promo code SOR 2019. It kills him. It grates him. There's nothing more that pisses him off more than when he has to give a discount when you purchase Mighty Moose Beard Oil. And I'll show you how easy it is. This is the old winter blend right here. You know, you just give it a little squeeze because that's always fun, right? You then just drop it into your hands like so. Rub it around your hands and then just massage it in. Massage it in. That's it. That's it. MightyMooseBeard.com is the website for Gary the Dutchman. And it's not just good for the beard, people. Ladies, gentlemen, it's good for the hair as well. You wonder how my hair looks always so moisturized and good? because I use my beard oil in there. Prevents split ends. It's all natural, no chemicals. That's how we do it. MightyMooseBeard.com. Really piss off Gary the Dutchman by using promo code SOR 2019. And while you're at it, hit him up, say, hey, Gary, I want to see your first $1 because I know you have it on you somewhere. He does, and he will show you. So make sure you check it on out. MightyMooseBeard.com, official beard sponsor of Spaced Out Radio. There you go. All right, what was that? Stephen, Dave is a Canadian hockey fan. You mentioned you don't watch NHL anymore. Why? Because it's not hockey. It's turned into soccer on ice. Every time there's a hard hit, it's a penalty. You don't need 2 referees out there. Players whining, complaining, putting the visors on full time was one of the worst mistakes that the NHL has made, even though it does protect the eyes. I'm not going to deny that. All right? And they look for the referees for everything. Too many penalties, not enough players deciding the outcome. It's not fun to watch anymore. It's terrible to watch. Garbage. Yep. Garbage. Sorry, little sensitive topic there for me. Don't need 2 refs. Don't need 2 refs. Kills the flow. And the amount of phantom calls in every NHL game is terrible. We have 20 seconds. I want to say a big thank you to Fapster, Black Dragon, Carla, and Ben for the amazing super chats tonight. Really do appreciate the love and support of supporting what we do on a nightly basis on Spaced Out Radio. So thank you so much. Thank you to all our new subscribers. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways, whatever you feel we deserve. We are here 7 days a week for you. So here we go. Past the halfway point of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate it. I want to remind you that if you missed portions of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you, including Rockin' Out to Bumblefoot, read Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show, and now on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We're switching topics tonight, but we're staying in ancient history. Dr. Debbie Felton from University of Massachusetts Amherst is here. She's got another book out that I think is going to be real intriguing to our audience called Haunted Greece and Rome, Ghost Stories from Classical Antiquity. And it can be found on Amazon, which I highly suggest. This would be a good one for your library. Dr. Debbie, welcome back.
Thanks again for having me.
No problem. No problem. I'm curious. Back then, we know that people were a lot more spiritual than they are today. Were ghosts and ghost stories a part of the folklore as much as they are today?
Yeah, definitely. I think the difference is that because most of the sources that we have, it's literature that was written by, the upper classes. The lower classes didn't necessarily, they were too busy to sit there writing stories and recording their thoughts. But what we do have are some stories that are that clearly have a basis in folk belief. Yes, a lot of people seem to have believed in or wanted to believe in an afterlife and ghosts and restless spirits. And a lot of those stories were told in order to reinforce proper behavior regarding the dead and make sure they're buried, properly according to ritual. Don't let any restless spirits wander around if you could possibly help it.
What kind of ghosts were they seeing back then? Were they of atypical spirits like what we project a ghost to be today?
They had a lot of different shapes and forms, and a lot of the stories say, well, it looked like the apparition looked like the person did in life, or maybe at the time of their death. So you could have mutilated corpses as ghosts, like the ghost of Hector from the Trojan War, from the Iliad, for example. The ghost of Hector shows up in later literature looking as he did at the moment of death, which was pretty torn up because Achilles had been dragging him around on the ground. Other ghosts just look the way they did in life. Nothing unusual about them. Even there's somebody who died by falling off a roof and breaking his neck because he was drunk. And when his ghost showed up, he just looked the same way he did in life. There was nothing like weirdly broken about his neck or anything. And then there's the chain rattling ghost that I mentioned earlier. It's just the ghost of an old man, very emaciated and in chains, who, the implication is that he was a prisoner in that house at some point and just died of neglect, starvation, thirst, whatever. They just put him in chains and left him someplace. So there were just all kinds of beliefs about what ghosts could look like. Some of them were sort of dark and sooty, as if they had been burned on the pyre, but there were not this. You don't have descriptions of like sheets, like ghosts like in their shrouds, for example. So you don't have that from antiquity.
All right, quick question here from Nikki here in Seattle, and she is asking, were there any ancient Egyptian serial killers?
Oh my God, that's a great question. I mean, there must have been. The thing is, Egypt, I haven't looked at Egypt. Egypt is a whole separate culture that I have not had a chance to delve into. I'm going to have to ask my Egyptologist friends whether they know any. Feel free to send me an email, and I will try to get an answer for that question for you.
Very cool. Very cool. All right, let's continue on with the haunted ghost stories back then. Looking at those times, where people were, maybe a little bit more tad religious, ghost stories, if I read correctly, or, I'm going to use a bad example here. I loved the television show Hercules along with Xena. I really did. But you saw a lot of different tales of ghosts in those stories as well, and it wasn't just people. It was different creatures. It was the gods themselves coming down, almost like what we read in the Bible, so to speak.
So the question is,
in regards to the ghosts that they were seeing, how real were they?
Oh, okay. So I'm not sure we have a good answer to that. It's sort of the same as now. Some of these stories were literary ghost stories. Some of them were reflections of folk belief. And I mean, you know how like we have Halloween and it's supposed to be a night where spirits are out, and you like put pumpkins with scary faces on your doorstep as an apotropaic, like to sort of scare away the spirits that are trying to come into your house. Well, one thing we can say about ancient beliefs in ghosts is that there must have been a certain amount of true belief that the dead could come back, because they had a number of festivals to acknowledge this, to honor the dead ancestors, and also to make sure they didn't come in the house. So they would spread like tar or pitch on their doorway during some of these festivals so that any ghosts trying to come into the house would get stuck, theoretically. They would leave food out on their doorstep, food and drink and wine on their doorstep, so that the ghosts would have that and, again, not try to come into the house. Or they would go to the cemetery. People would go to the cemetery and leave offerings there. So again, in terms of how real it was to people, it was real enough that both the Greeks and the Romans each had several different ceremonies over the course of the year to acknowledge the dead and keep them appeased so they wouldn't come back and haunt. So I don't know if that helps answer that question.
Oh, it works. I'll go with that.
Okay. Sure.
I'll go with that.
And can I just say I appreciate all the love for the calico cat that I'm seeing in the comments?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure.
That's the black cat that I was hoping would make an appearance. So much more appropriate if the black cat comes along. True. But I think he's sleeping somewhere.
He showed up at the beginning, right before we were on the air.
That's right.
So that kind of worked out for me, at least. My black one's sleeping upstairs as well. So, yeah. All right, let's move on. Haunted houses. Were there a lot of haunted houses back then?
it depends what you call a lot. There certainly were stories of haunted houses. And the one I mentioned before, which was just my absolute favorite, because it was so surprisingly typical. I mean, there's this ghost that haunts a house, and the people are terrified. They feel like they can't leave because they got their money invested in the house. And eventually they like die of illness or fear. And finally the house is just abandoned, and it starts, falling into disrepair. And there's a like for rent sign put up in front of it by the landlord. And somebody from out of town comes, sees the sign, wonders why the house is so cheap to rent or to buy. And he actually is told about the haunting and says, that sounds interesting. I think I will rent that house and stay there for the night and see if the story is true or not. So he spends the night in the house, and he is concerned, actually, that he might imagine the ghost because he's heard so much about it. So he decides to keep himself busy by doing work. So he has his little lamp, and he's got his writing implements, and he's just working. And he hears the sound of chains rattling coming closer and closer and closer to the room that he's in until the sound comes over the threshold and like right in the room with him. And he turns around at that point, and he does see this apparition of this old man with the rattling the chains, that the ghost has the chains on his arms and legs. And the guy just says, okay, hang on a second, just wait a minute. And he goes back to his writing, and the ghost is like, so the ghost comes even closer and rattles its chains right over the guy's head, at which point he's like, okay, I'm not imagining this. And he gets up, takes his lamp, follows the ghost into the courtyard where the ghost vanishes. And the guy marks the spot where the ghost vanished. And the next day when it's light out, people come, help him dig up the spot, and they find a skeleton entwined with chains right down there. So, the people bury it according to proper ritual, and the house isn't haunted anymore. And it's kind of I was going to say bare bones story, but that's a really bad and unintentional pun, but I said it anyway. So anyway, it sounds so much like the basic plot of so many haunted house stories. And there are a couple of other ones from ancient Greece and Rome that are very similar. There are other types of haunted places. There are haunted baths, because there were public baths in the ancient world, and some of those were haunted, and who knows what they were seeing in the steam there or imagining that they saw. So yeah, different kinds of places. There were haunted racetracks. There were places on some racetracks where if enough people had died at the turning point or wherever, horses, who are, animals are supposed to be a little more sensitive, horses would actually like stall at this point and rear back because there was something haunting the turning post on the racetrack. So again, lots of different kinds of haunted places.
Very true. Very true. Okay, what about entities? Were they seeing a lot of like horses and buggies? Could they hear the sounds of fallen troops marching down the marble roads? I mean, what were they hearing or seeing?
So in terms of hearing like ghostly presences, there's the most famous one of those, I think, is, as you said, at a battle site. So the Battle of Marathon, back in, I'm going to get this date right, 479 BCE, something like that. It was during the wars that the Persians were trying to invade Greece, and the Greeks were fighting back. So the Battle of Marathon, the Persians invaded. They sort of sent a bunch of ships across the sea to Greece, landed at Marathon, and the Greeks were vastly outnumbered, but they managed to win this battle, which is just kind of amazing. But it was said, for hundreds of years afterwards, that if you went there at night, you could hear the sounds of the battle still, and you could hear horses neighing, and you could hear the clashing of weapons. So that was an auditory haunting. Nobody ever said you could see anything there. It's just that you could hear. You could hear things, and then if you were smart, you'd stay away from the area just in case. So that's one example. I'm not sure how many others there were of just like hearing sounds. But there was the chains clanking in the story I mentioned before the apparition appears. But for the most part, I guess you could hear. I mentioned the baths, and there was a lot of groaning that you could hear coming from the haunted baths, for example. But again, that could have just been the pipes, the water in the pipes. So, people keep trying to rationalize these things. I'm not saying that I'm rationalizing, but this is, like I said, even in antiquity, people would try to come up with what they believed were more reasonable explanations for some of these things.
Where does the Bible come into play with all of this?
Because, sorry, where does what?
The Bible.
The Bible.
The Bible is filled with paranormal stories. And I always love this debate with my religious friends because they tell me to stay away from the paranormal. And I explain to them the Bible is the most paranormal book ever written.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose so. Again, different culture, ancient Near East, not so much Greece and Rome. And I don't remember my Bible ghost stories very much. Is something like the Witch of Endor, is that actually in the Bible or is that in the Apocrypha? But she does necromancy?
Apocrypha. It's not in the Bible.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, I'd have to ask one of my friends who specializes in biblical literature, and I could, come back with an answer for you after I consult somebody.
If you look at it, though, it's filled with ghosts. It's filled with ghosts. It's filled with magic. Yeah. It's filled with legends, climbing the mountains and speaking to God and burning bushes.
Parting the Red Sea.
Parting of the Red Sea. I mean,
plagues.
Exactly. I mean, this is something that is just, it's right out of, a paranormal book. It really is. Now, don't get me wrong. I realize this is a sensitive topic for a lot of people because I'm not insulting the Bible. So let's just be honest here. I have to make this clarification because, look, I've read the Bible front to back. Okay, I am, I have admitted on this show, I am a God guy. I like the God thing. Okay, but I mean, on the flip side, I look at the Bible, and anybody who denies that it is a paranormal or isn't a paranormal book, I mean, you need a good shaking to reality. You really do.
Well, there's been a lot of work done on Jesus as a magician, for example, and he even has basically the equivalent of a wand in some of the relief carvings showing him raising the dead or with the miracles of loaves and fishes, for example. So there have been several books, I think mostly by the same guy, is it Robert Connor, talking about Jesus as a sort of a mage in the same sort of mold as some of the ones from ancient Greece, actually. So the wise men who went around performing miracles, because you had some of those in ancient Greece also. So there are a lot of comparisons made with Jesus and vice versa. And exorcisms, right? So Jesus performed exorcisms, and some of these magicians in ancient Greece were said to also do that. Like Apollonius, I think Apollonius of Tyana was the name of one of them.
Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. So getting back to the whole, Greek and Roman times of hauntings, I mean, were they seeing a lot of religious deities coming down to talking to them and having those spiritual connections?
That doesn't seem to have happened on a personal level. What you see more of, I think, in the ancient sources is like oracles, like these intermediaries, what we would call a medium in a seance, for example. That's a sort of a small-scale version. So a medium in a seance is a small-scale version of these sibyls and oracles in the ancient world who would be the intermediaries between the gods and mortals. And so if you wanted to consult the god Apollo and ask him a question about should our little city state send out a colony, somewhere, and where should we send it, and who should the patron god be? You could make an inquiry of Apollo by sending an ambassador of sorts, or someone to inquire from the Pythia, the Delphic oracle, the priestess who was the mouthpiece of Apollo at Delphi, and she would go into a trance and allegedly, and commune with the god Apollo, allegedly, and come back with some sort of an answer that was usually ambiguous. The most famous one probably being when King Croesus of Lydia sent a messenger to the Delphic oracle to ask whether he should invade Persia. Okay. And the oracle came back with, if you invade Persia, you will destroy a great kingdom. And spoiler alert, he interpreted that as meaning that he would in fact destroy Persia, when what it meant was that Persia would destroy Lydia, which was also a great kingdom. So the oracles were known for being pretty ambiguous, and it was up to you to interpret them and to be sensible about how you interpreted them instead of being hubristic about it, or at least to come back and ask the right questions.
All right. What about Plautus and his haunted house and his ability to, try and understand the paranormal?
So Plautus was a comic playwright a couple of centuries BC, and BCE, I should say. And one of his plays is about a haunted house, and the title of that play is the Monsteralia, which basically means the little monster, but it's usually translated as the haunted house anyway, because just a little monster in a haunted house kind of concept. So it's a comic play, and the ghost story is told as part of a trick to try to keep the father away from the house, because his son is having a party with all of his friends and isn't supposed to be having a party. So the point is to keep the old man, the father, away from the house. So one of the servants makes up this story is, while you were away, old man, we found out that the house was haunted, so nobody can go in there right now. And here's what happened. The house is possessed by the spirit of a traveler who was killed in the house. He was supposed to be a guest in the house, and the host killed him for his money. And now he's threatening to kill anybody who comes in the house. So stay away. And the old man hears noises coming from inside the house, which is the son partying. And the servant who's making up the story says, "Yeah, see how much noise the ghost is making right now because he's upset." So it's basically this a haunted house story similar to the one about the chain rattling ghost, which is that somebody was killed on the premises, probably for their money. We don't exactly know with the chain rattling ghost, but is basically haunting the house until somebody gets rid of it. So we've got a partial haunted house story in that comic play. So what was going on in that story is that Plautus, the comic playwright, seems to have been making fun of people who were overly superstitious, like the old man. And there was a lot of satire of people who were too superstitious back then also. So again, this huge range of beliefs in terms of no, there's nothing after you die, or sure, there's an afterlife and here's what it's like, or make sure you bury the dead properly or they will be restless and haunt you.
I will tell you a cool ghost story.
I'd love to hear one.
Going back to the Roman theater of Philippopolis in Plovdiv, Czech Republic. So this happened a few years ago to a friend of mine and a friend of this show's, a gentleman named Ron Bumblefoot Thal, who does our music. Okay? So here's the stage, and his band is called Sons of Apollo, and they were playing there a couple of years ago, and they were playing so they played their own set of their own music, and then they followed that up by a bunch of cover tunes. And now Ron Thal is ranked one of the top 10 guitarists in the world. And he has never fallen on stage. So while they were playing, he has never had anything weird happen, and his guitar is very expensive to the point where it doesn't go out of tune. Well, all of a sudden, all of these solos that he started playing, and while he's playing, he's noticing his top string, an E string, keeps going out of tune. And he can't understand it. So in between songs, he's having to retune his string, and he's like, wow, this is weird. So then they play their cover version of Pink Floyd's Comfortably Numb. And so Bumblefoot is literally walking towards the crowd, and he gets shoved, and he falls on stage. First time in 20 plus years he had ever fallen on stage. And he will say to this day that he didn't trip on his own feet, didn't trip on any chords because his guitar is cordless. And something shoved him from behind. And right before that had happened, the keyboardist, a guy named Derek Sherinian, he was when the concert started, it was still some daylight, so he, typical rock star, had his sunglasses on, and as it got darker, he put his sunglasses on top of his head, and all of a sudden he felt a wallop on the side of his head, and the sunglasses went falling in between one of the cracks on the stage.
So like there's an unseen force shoving people around. That's a great story.
Absolutely. But it continues there. Another friend of mine in the music business, I won't mention his name, he actually got intoxicated during a concert in Plovdiv at this same place like 4 months later. He was thrown in jail. And while he was in jail, he swears up and down that he watched literally hell open loose inside the police station where the jail cells were, and he watched the devil walk out and right towards him at his cell. And it all happened in Plovdiv.
Wow, so there's something going on there.
Hugely. I think it's fantastic. I really do.
I'm gonna have to look up that site because that's just too interesting of a story not to read more about.
Oh yeah. You won't find it. You'll find it on this show. There's no literature on it, unfortunately, but you'll find it.
You got
on
to
this
put
show.
it in Wikipedia then.
Have to.
Yeah.
Dr. Debbie Felton, I'm going to get you to hold on for another few seconds here because we are going to go to break here at the top of the hour. We have Dr. Debbie Felton here on Spaced Out Radio tonight, and we are moving into a different direction. What about these crazy monsters that were running around back in the day? Did they see UFOs? Who didn't have a pet minotaur back then? We'll find out. Where's Goat Boy? Spaced Out Radio continues after this. There's the black kitty.
Yeah.
Here, we'll zoom in on him a little bit. Look how cute he is.
Oh, say hi.
He's like, I'm getting out of here.
He's
like
like,
this.
why are you in bed?
Don't like this. I'm out. Oh, yeah. I know what it's like.
They're just the cats are weirded out that I'm up this late, I think. They're normally like sleeping on my head or something by this point.
My cats are always like, oh, you're still awake? Okay. The only weird part about my cats, literally, is I will go upstairs after my show. I'll go to crawl into bed, and I'll have 2 to 3 cats sleeping on my side of the bed. And I like my bed cold when I crawl in, and I literally don't get a cold bed because the cats have warmed everything up. And it really drives me nuts when one of them sleeps on my pillows because I really like cold pillows. And then I got warm pillow head. I hate that. Hate that.
Aww. Yeah. I actually have trouble sleeping if the cats aren't on the bed.
Before I got a new bed, my dogs used to come up. So I'd have the cats and and 2 German Shepherd dogs up on the bed. And it'd be and I'd be like contorted into this weird position, just trying to find room for my legs.
Yeah, I remember that. I used to have dogs too. It's been a while, but yeah, there'd be the dog on one side, a cat on the other, and I'd wake up with a sore back. And I'd be like, it's worth it.
2 seconds here.
Yeah, come here, kitty. Come on. He's right here. He's just like wants to know what's going on.
That's what I wanted right there. Okay. Now I'm almost ready. I am almost ready. And that goes there. All right. That's when I start my transfer into hour 3 here. Are you still having fun?
Sure, why not?
She's like, damn.
You got some great stories.
She's like, damn Canadians, shut up. I actually trained a kid in hockey who ended up getting a scholarship at UMass Amherst.
Oh.
This is going back.
Yeah.
1994, 95.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's my connection to it.
Cool. Yeah, no, I really like it out here. Like I said, I'm from LA, but I kind of like New England. It's got to change the seasons. Things are closer together.
That was the biggest. I'd never been to the East Coast until like the mid 2000s. I never knew how close together it all was. Never knew. Blew my mind when I was there.
Well, I remember having a friend from England visit me in Los Angeles once, and she didn't realize how far apart things were. And she said, "Can we go to San Francisco for the day?" And I said, "We can go to San Francisco in a day. It's going to take us like 6 hours just to drive there. So maybe not." And I had to explain to her that it was sort of like the difference between, it was like asking to go from London to Edinburgh for the day, which at least they have trains to do that. But I think back then, Amtrak was running even less than it does now, and people just drive back and forth.
Oh, I hear you. I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Every day, can't figure it out. All right, we've got a couple minutes left.
I'll see if I get the cat back.
Wonderful.
Yep, he's still here.
Perfect.
Hey. He can be here.
Why not? We allow it.
He sometimes likes to play with the solar system that I have right here, hanging from the ceiling. Now he's playing with a pen instead, though. Okay. Yeah, he's wide awake now.
Awesome. Well,
He's staring at me. And he's about to unplug the computer, so I'm going to keep my eye on that. He's like playing with the power cord. That's all right. I got some battery power.
There you go. All right. We've got just under a minute here. All right, big thank you to Jeremy, Flat Earther, Fapster, Black Dragon, Carla, and Ben for the amazing super chats tonight. And we appreciate that. Thank you to all our new subscribers who've tuned us on in. We really do appreciate that. And don't forget, if you have a TikTok account, we got a brand new account there. We would appreciate you hitting that subscribe button on us for that. That would be really, really cool. Here we go, everyone, with the third hour.
Would you like to connect with us? Head to spacedoutradio.com for all your latest show info. Now, back to Dave Scott and SOR.
Here we go with the third and final hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much to hang out with us. We really do appreciate it, especially if you're listening in on our terrestrial affiliates around North America and digitally on TalkStream Live, Revolution Radio, and KPNL. All of our archives are free. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Just do old Davey the favor. Hit that subscribe button. The Desert Clam has set the password for tonight in the SOR Space Travelers Club. Latificate. Latificate is your password. Use it wisely, Space Travelers, as the Clam sets a password each and every night right here on Spaced Out Radio. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot, reading up on Shirky Poo's Newswire. Check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show, and once again, new on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. For the final time tonight from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, Dr. Debbie Felton is here. We're looking into the weird and strange mythological ghost and paranormal stories along with cryptid creatures. Yep, You can find her books on Amazon, and we're having a great time with Dr. Felton tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, Doc.
Thanks again for having me. Hey, I got a question for you, though.
Yes.
You keep mentioning your terrestrial affiliates. Do you actually have extraterrestrial affiliates?
I don't know. It would be nice if Auk and Zook from the Zeta Reticuli were picking us up. We'd appreciate that. But otherwise, I don't know if we have extraterrestrial affiliates. That's interesting.
Just had to ask.
I don't know.
Sorry.
You know, weird story once. I was once told by someone that they're up to, depending on the topic we have for the night, there are up to 6 people tuning us in at the Pentagon to see what we are saying. And that's a
little disturbing.
Yeah, this person was one of those in the know type people. Yeah. So, Gene, if you're listening, hi, Gene, at the Pentagon. We really appreciate you tuning us in. Give us a call sometime. We'd love to say hello. That's all I know. One person named Gene.
Okay.
It is awesome. I'm not going to lie. So.
Yeah, you're important enough for the government to be worried about you. So.
Yes. I could just imagine what it looks like when I swipe my passport crossing the border. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see. What's out there? What do they got on me? Okay, moving on. Really weird Greek cryptid creatures. This is a fascinating topic for me because literally, I mean, it goes from giant griffins to thunderbirds to centaurs and chimera and cyclopses. Were these real creatures that were actually living and breathing? Because realistically, for all we know, it's just a bunch of folklore.
Yeah, no, I'm going to go with no on that. That these creatures did not exist, and that it's a bunch of folklore. I think I probably are. I might have mentioned this already, but there are a couple of things going on with that in terms of these creatures can all be like, allegorical or metaphorical for things. But before we even get into any of that, if you even want to, there were, back in antiquity, there were people who were rationalizing and saying, it does not make any sense for an animal to have part of a bird and part of a lion. It just couldn't possibly exist. So even back then, they were like, this is not natural. This is not something that's going to happen in nature. And then on the other side of that, we've got Adrienne Mayer with her theory about how a lot of these monsters might have been inspired by finds of dinosaur and ice age mammal fossils. For example, what was it? I think, is it mammoths or mastodons? She was saying like they have a big temporal fenestra that, once in the skull, when you just see the skull of one of these things, it looks like there's a big hole in the middle, something like that. I think I've got the technical details mixed up, but she's got this book, The First Fossil Hunters, Paleontology in Greek and Roman Times. And she makes an argument that maybe some of these giant fossil finds influenced ideas about these creatures. But again, they represent so many things for the Greeks and Romans that it's hard to pin down just one reason why they came up with these monsters. And it's not like it was just the Greeks and Romans. I mean, you go over to Asia, they got all sorts of interesting, monsters over there too.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I know it's easy to dismiss that these creatures did not exist, but they had to come from somewhere rather than just boring imagination.
Well, let's see.
Like, wouldn't you want to see half a deer and half a boy running around the forest?
I'm not so sure about that. And then there's the whole, genetic aspects to how these things would reproduce, but I'm not even going to, go any farther with that. But, what was I going to say? So, this is one of the big questions, obviously, about these mythological creatures, is what inspired these, what inspired people to come up with creatures that look like this, that have such hybrid parts, that have such weird powers, like some of them do breathe fire, or they've got multiple snake heads or whatever. So why? And monster theory, which I think a lot of that is attributed to Jeffrey Jerome Cohen, who literally wrote a book called Monster Theory, that started this whole much deeper investigation into why cultures come up with monsters in the first place. He talks about how monsters are culturally constructed, like what the anxieties and fears of a culture are at a certain time are reflected in their stories. So, for example, I'm going to go back to those 1950s monster movies, like Them with the gigantic ants, and that was just a period of time when, among other things, there was a lot of testing of nuclear bombs. For example, this was post-World War II. You'd already had the atomic bomb. There's a lot of bomb testing going on and fears of radiation, like what is it going to do to the environment? So you end up with all these giant, giant insects were a big thing. There were obviously other giant creatures and mutated creatures like Godzilla, another famous example. So you have these radiation-induced monsters, for example, and there are other things like Invasion of the Body Snatchers with the pod people, and that's communism, fears of communist takeovers. So depending on the era, the kinds of monsters that a culture comes up with may be reflecting certain fears. And I think I had mentioned earlier, tell me if I'm droning on too much about this.
No, you're doing great.
But a lot of those monsters in the earlier stories in Greece were really just these chaos monsters representing the savagery of the natural world that had to be tamed by mankind. I'm going to say mankind, not humankind, because back then that's pretty much how they thought about it. That man had to tame nature. And the other reason I just corrected myself is because these monsters were often female, or intentionally produced by females to fight against the males. So there's this whole male-female conflict going on too, like under the surface there is sort of a subtext, I guess. So anyway, just so many different reasons why these monsters came out the way they came out. A lot of them are female. A lot of them are, Charybdis is just one giant gaping female hole. Let's just put it that way. And then Scylla, on the other hand, has all of these mouths. It's like basically a vagina dentata, actually. So a lot of fear of feminine sexuality reflected in some of these monsters, for example. So many different things you could say about them.
Very weird. Very weird. Out of all those creatures, do you think there was possibility that some of them were real?
Oh gosh!
Like I don't see a centaur or a minotaur being real, but I'm just curious. Like the fairy folk, the elves, people like that, or creatures like that.
In antiquity, do I think there were maybe some things like that in antiquity? I have a really hard time believing that. Which I'm the sort of person who's more likely to believe that maybe there was an actual woolly mammoth somewhere still, because I think they were still around in the time of not Cleopatra. I don't know. Maybe the last one did die out around the time of Cleopatra. The timeline is a little, I don't remember it very well, but there could certainly have still been some weird creatures around. I mean, let's take the Loch Ness Monster, for example. If there were such a thing, people tried to say, well, maybe that's a plesiosaur or something. Again, an ancient sea creature that somehow survived into modern times. So I'm more likely to believe that something like that happened than that there really were these weird hybrids with incompatible parts. I'm not sure if that, again, it sort of goes directly towards what you were asking. But that's my more along the lines of what I would be inclined to think, I suppose.
Come on, you don't think Medusa had snakes on her head?
Medusa is such an interesting story because, I think one of the few film versions that got it right was, I think it was the Percy Jackson movie, actually, because Medusa was played by Uma Thurman, right? So in the myths, she really was a beautiful woman who was just cursed because, well, again, not so much her fault. The god Poseidon had seduced her in an area that was sacred to a goddess. And so the goddess, I think it was Athena, maybe, made her into this sort of monstrous creature that would petrify anything that she looked at. So again, there's all sorts of issues with female sexuality going on there. Freud had a field day with Medusa, but again, don't really want to go there because Freud is not so much in vogue anymore. But just the whole female sexuality issue in terms of how many of those monsters are female and have a certain effect on men.
Very true. Scary times.
And have to be killed by men. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, that was our job, killing everything back then. Killing everything. That's just what we did. That's just what we did. But I mean, okay, let's look at something, because you actually know someone who wrote a thesis or a story about UFO sightings back then.
It was actually a journal article, and it's several decades old, and unfortunately the author passed away a while back. But yeah, he had actually written on, and I think he had some background in aerial phenomenon too, like I think he was a scientist, and he was interested in looking at reports of unidentified flying objects, like literally unidentified, like literally UFOs. Not saying they were extraterrestrial necessarily. So he looked at descriptions of ships floating in the sky in antiquity, and to what extent were they considered omens or portents, messages from the gods, and whether they were or not, what were people actually seeing when they reported things like that. So it was a terrific article. If you're interested, I could actually send you that reference. But he found a lot of examples that were these things were usually spotted in times of war, so high stress times for people. There might have been unusual meteorological phenomena at the time as well, like stormy skies. So just he found way more examples than I would have expected, though, of like ships being spotted in the sky, or people flying in the sky, like winged people flying in the sky. So just fascinating stuff.
But if I'm wrong, I don't think I'm wrong on this, but I recall reading somewhere that back in the 13, 14, 15, 1600s, when traveling by boat and trying to find new lands was all the rage, that people who actually saw UFOs were actually seeing giant, wooden structured ships, with oars moving through the sky. And, it had nothing to do with these discs or black triangles or boomerangs or cigar shapes or whatever.
Right. It was all shapes that they would already be familiar with.
Why do you think that is?
Well, that's an interesting question too, isn't it? I mean, because it was the same in antiquity. It's not like they were seeing, saucer-shaped UFOs, or again the boomerang shapes, or say Borg cubes. But you haven't watched Star Trek, so you don't know what I'm talking about. So sorry, I just had to. So again, it sort of might have to do with the reflection of the anxieties of the times. But the other thing that he considered, I think, in this article, or that people have considered since then, is something I think we just saw like a year or two ago, which was that picture of like the big ship floating in the sky, but it was an optical illusion, right? It had something to do with light refraction. So it actually looked like the ship was floating in the sky when it was definitely on the water. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because this was just in the news. Like, was it last year? Maybe anybody out in the audience remembers what happened. But it really did look like this ship was in the sky when it was not. So you sort of wonder.
I remember that photo.
So you know what I'm talking about. So I wonder if that's a phenomenon that maybe caused some of these sightings. I'm not saying it would explain all of them, because I think there are too many sightings, to all be explained by the one thing. But it might explain some of them. So who knows? Although I think in antiquity, the sightings were mostly by armies fighting on land. So we're not even talking about light reflecting off of water or anything. It can happen in the desert too, though, now that I think about it.
Could it be that a lot of these gods that the Greeks and the Romans were praying to could have been these UFOs being seen in the sky?
Or aliens from another planet? Well, let's just say Star Trek's been there, done that.
I'm an alien guy. I'm pro-alien.
Yeah, and why not? I mean, it's a big universe. So there's no way to know. I mean, it's certainly possible. I'm not going to say it's not possible, and I am going to point to the Star Trek episode, original Star Trek, where the god Apollo was in fact a visitor from another planet, and all the Greek gods were. but they faded away when people stopped believing in them. And Apollo just kind of hung on in the hope that maybe someone would start believing again. And it turned out their powers were all like from like, machines and things like that. It was all rationalized.
Could it be that far-fetched, though, that the gods that the Greeks and the Romans thought of and prayed to as deities, how far-fetched is that idea that it may have been extraterrestrial of some sort?
Yeah, I don't know that it is far-fetched. I mean, there have been a lot of different versions of that kind of idea. If you look at something like 2001: A Space Odyssey with those monoliths, I mean, part of what was going on there is the early man, or pre-early man, seemed to be inspired by the monolith to develop further and start using bones as weapons. So that's an alien interference of a sort also. And then when they find the monolith on the moon, it inspires them to go to Jupiter where the signal was sent to. So the idea of alien interference in human development it's not uncommon, I guess.
Okay, I'm not sure you'll know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Okay. Were there ever any recordings of crop circles back in the ancient times?
Well, it's an interesting question because my first impulse was to say, well, they don't exactly have aerial views, but that's not entirely true because you could go up on a mountain and maybe, obviously you could look down on a valley from a mountain, but I don't offhand know of any. And then even if you couldn't see them, that doesn't mean people weren't making them. And you've got those figures in England, right? In the UK, you've got all those like sort of giants.
By the way, on video, I'm just going to cut you off right there. On video, as you were talking about this, I don't know if our audience members saw it on YouTube or Twitch, but there was an actual white orb that just went right across your chest to the left. And then disappeared out of screen. So you've got ghosts. Just saying, you've got ghosts.
Yeah, I mean, there's an orb like up there in that picture. That's
white though. No, this
not actually in the picture.
No, this one was down on your chest area, like right across here.
It just went across, huh?
Yeah, that was kind of cool. You could look it up at this.
Okay,
time.
Well that's creepy. Now I'm freaked out.
Yeah, well, hey, when you delve in the woo, you're going to get some woo every now and again.
Yeah,
that works for me. So
that's it is it is late and weird things happen at liminal times of day and
even though you don't want to believe it, you got to have it. You got some weird.
I didn't say I didn't want to believe it. I just said that so far I don't have any reason to believe it. I'm again without a religious background. I'm not a super faith-based person, but I'm not ruling it out. Just because I don't like have any personal experience of it doesn't mean that it's not a thing.
True. Yeah. I just found that was very interesting. Very interesting. I might actually go back and look at that here. But no, very cool nonetheless. But you were talking about we were just talking about crop circles and the idea that, you were saying, yes, there was the couple of drunks in England who claimed to be making these very elaborate pieces of art, shall we say, in wheat and canola fields across the United Kingdom.
I didn't say the drunks. I was talking about something much older.
No, I called them drunks because...
Yeah, okay. Don't put words in my mouth.
No, I'll take credit for that one. Don't worry.
So I actually don't know for sure if there are any descriptions of anything like that from antiquity. That would be worth looking into.
I think so too.
Another cool topic. Yeah.
We got 2.5 minutes left with you. Are you planning on doing more and writing more books regarding these paranormal subjects of the past?
Well, my next major project is going to be on revenants in the ancient world, The Walking Dead. It's a little late, I can't call them The Walking Dead because the whole graphic novel and TV series kind of ruined that title. So I'm going to have to call them revenants. But there are a bunch of Walking Dead in ancient literature. And I've started looking into it, and it looks like they tend to show up at times of civil unrest. So part of the message in these stories seems to be, well, this is The Walking Dead is very unnatural. It shouldn't be that way. And is that a reflection of the civil unrest? Like, we shouldn't be at war with each other because that's unnatural. So that's, the research is in its really preliminary stages. But there are a lot of really interesting revenant stories out there, including one of just a girl who comes back to have sex with a guest in her parents' house because she died unmarried, and she missed out. So
Wow.
they don't all relate to civil unrest.
Sex. Go sex.
Yeah.
We just had that topic last night. I'm still blushing from it.
You got it in antiquity too. Like I said, they did it first. So.
Well, you know what? I'm still blushing over the topic last night. We got a minute to go. Do me a favor. Tell our audience about your books and where they can find more information on them and you.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess the first thing I should say is I'm not in this for the money because, hey, these are all academic presses, even if they are general audience books. So it's not like I make any money off of them. I'm sure there are used copies floating around. There are library copies. But if you are interested, they are all available on Amazon. So the Serial Killers book, Monsters and Monarchs, The Haunted Greece and Rome, they're all on Amazon. And they're all in paperback. And they're easy to find. And I mean, they're Amazon, Barnes and Noble, online. They're just, you can easily get them online. They're not like, some esoteric press that's hard to get or something. It's just University of Texas Press. And like I said, online is easy if anyone's interested.
Awesome. Dr. Debbie Felton, I got to tell you, I had so much fun chatting with you tonight. I hope we did you justice, for your brilliancy and my idiotic Canadian humor. I really appreciate that, but you were amazing tonight. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you can tell that I had a lot of fun, and it was also fun to be able to mock you about not ever having watched Star Trek, because True. I still can't freaking believe it.
True.
But anyway.
When you write your next book, as we got to get going here, please let us know. I would love to bring you back on.
Oh, sure. Thanks again for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
I appreciate your audience, too, and their love of cats, except for the few that don't like cats.
Coming up next, filling in for an ailing John Hudson, Nicole Sackage is here with the unbiased UFO Report. We'll be back with Spaced Out Radio after this. Great job. That was so much fun.
Thanks again for having me. That really was fun. So,
do you have an email where our audience can contact you?
Yeah, it's just my last name, Felton at UMass.edu. Is there someplace I can type it in? Maybe
I'm doing it right now.
Okay.
Felton at UMass.edu.
Yeah.
There, I typed it in.
I think I got it in.
A lot of fun with you tonight. Thank you so much for staying up late. I really appreciate it.
Oh, sure. No, thanks for having me. It's always fun to talk about this stuff, because a lot of people just don't know that, ancient Greece and Rome had anything like this. So.
All right. Well, you take care. You go enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks.
Some of us are going to continue on the radio here for a little bit.
Wow. Okay. Well, thanks again so much for having me. I really did have a good time.
Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Let's be honest. How awesome was she? How awesome was she? She was awesome. I love her. Hi, Nicole Sackage, the cook.
Hello, Spaced Out Radio and Dave Scott and Dave Scott's beard.
I know you hate the beard.
No, it's just, I'm wondering because, we still wear our masks at my work all the time, and I have a lot of bearded guys that I work with, and so they wear the masks, right? And their beards are all starting to curl up, where their masks lay. So, are you Canadians having that same problem? I'm just wondering. Or does the Mighty Moose beard oil take care of that?
The beard oil helps. The Mighty Moose beard oil helps.
Oh, I had another work-related fun thing happen to me today.
Oh, fun. Do you want to share it with the full audience, or do you?
Well, I wear these glasses when I'm asleep because they don't have any sides on them.
I don't even know how they stay on your nose.
Right. Well, because I have this great long nose, But anyway, so I was at work this morning and I was cleaning stuff like I always do. And I was hooking up this new vat of floor cleaner to this tube system we have. And I sat this thing down and like one droplet shot up in the air and right into my eye.
Oh no.
I know. So I like did the whole flush my eyes stuff, and I was fine kind of all day long, but I told you I fell asleep, and as soon as I woke up, like it's just terrible. So I apologize if I look like I'm crying. It's not right. Because ufology is terrible this week.
Well, you know what? I thank you for filling in for the ailing John Hudson. So
it's all right. You know, we all got each other's backs. That's what we do.
I talked to John yesterday. He wasn't feeling so good. And so I said, if you're ready to go tonight, get a hold of me. And he didn't get a hold of me. So he's probably passed out, not feeling very well.
Oh, poor John. Mm-hmm. I almost grabbed my fedora out of the closet.
You totally should have.
Him, but
you totally should have.
If my eyesight would be better, I would dig into my 12-foot long closet that doesn't have a light. But
I hear you. We've got about 2 minutes here.
Sweet. I'm going to let my dog out real quick.
You go. Hope your dog doesn't chase any deer.
He might, but he's fenced in, so.
You will notice in Nicole's picture, or that frame right above, you will notice the spaced out radio stickers and the piece of coaxial cable autographed by Cable Guy Matt. Because you cannot buy these in stores. There you go. Nicole's pointing at it right now. There's her autographed piece of coaxial cable right there. Cable Guy Matt, when you showed him that, he almost went crazy. He was so excited.
It's right up here with all my son's artwork and other memorabilia. Like Jordan Pease made me this so I could look at it while I was giving my very first lecture.
Very nice. Love Jordan Pease.
I do too. He's awesome sauce.
All right, a big thank you tonight to Jeremy, Flat Earther, Fapster, Black Dragon, Carla, and Ben for the amazing super chats. Really do appreciate the love and support. It's a great way to support what we do on a nightly basis. I want to say a big thank you to everybody who hit that subscribe button and rang that bell and is following us on social media. And, of course, to all the veterans out there, we absolutely love you. You always have a safe home here on Spaced Out Radio and our chats. Here we go. Rounded third. We're heading for home tonight on Spaced Out Radio. My name is Dave Scott. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Really do appreciate it. Want to remind you that if you missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives. Go to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do me the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website is spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read up on Shirky Poo's Newswire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and on Instagram, Spaced Out Radio Show. And we're new to TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. Now, it is time, once again, for the Unbiased UFO Report. I love that song. Love it. Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thalls, The Day After. Love it. Filling in for an ailing John Hudson, we have researcher extraordinaire, author Nicole Sackich with the Unbiased UFO Report tonight. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I'm so sorry Mr. Hudson's sick, but I'll fill in anytime.
I think you're going to be. I know. I think you're going to be fantastic. I really do. We got some weird stories that have really come out. Now, earlier today, it was announced by Dr. Stephen Greer that, yeah, I know that he wants to make sure that anything that Senator Gillibrand comes out of with her new proposal of unexplained sightings, more commonly known as UFOs or UAP, that he's part of the process and that he could be one of the professional experts that she can rely upon. What do you think about that?
This is the first I'm hearing of this, actually. So, I'm not going to make any snap wild, like, oh, Greer, blah. I'm going to fall back on the Wilson document, Greer. Like, there was truth in that. He was talking about these things a decade, 2 decades before we were. He has sources. He does kind of know how to play this ego game with these political government egos. So I say go for it. Send in Greer, but he can't be the only one. Sorry, he can't be the only one. If we're sending in representatives, sure, Greer, but, I nominate Grant. Even though he's Canadian, I nominate Grant to go into, and Linda, throw in Linda.
All right. Well, this is what's said here. Senator Gillibrand and this committee need the authoritative and truthful information they will get from Dr. Greer. Please tell Senator Gillibrand that Dr. Greer is the world's expert on UFOs and extraterrestrial intelligence. Let her know that he has been briefed, or that he has briefed world leaders, a sitting CIA director, head of intelligence to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and other notables.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant. Everybody throws around, oh, Greer has this giant ego. And, I think a giant ego is needed to build what he's built and to go toe-to-toe with people like he has gone. These government people have giant egos too, especially when you're talking about, military people. So you can't have a Minnie Mouse type person go up against these people. You need a big ego to go back. So
very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, let's move on to topics here, because recently Lou Elizondo, who's been ominously silent recently, posted a photograph on his Twitter account posing with Chris Mellon in front of the congressional buildings in Washington, D.C. And basically, being all secluded, basically, what are we doing here? Who knows what we're doing here? Why would we be here? What's our purpose of being here?
It was a now selfie. It wasn't from a few years ago.
No, it was a brand new selfie where apparently they have been meeting with people regarding this topic. Lou Elizondo gets a lot of grief because he says a lot without saying a lot. And when he tries to say something, he hides behind his NDAs, his non-disclosure agreements that he has. Do you think that he is right in the middle of all of these talks as the leading expert regarding the UAP phenomena, or do you think he's just sitting in to these talks to listen to what's going on because he has the pull and the ability to do so?
I hope it's a little bit of both, He's obviously a champion in our community right now, whether you agree with everything that's going on with him or his background or whatever. But I think the more faces we can put to this, the better. And if he's going to be in there and kind of like steer it in our direction or be a part of it, then I think, it's all hands on deck. I'm kind of excited because I've been calling this, his third gear, like what's going on? And they're saying it's all behind the scenes. So it's behind our scenes, but it's, he's doing what he does. That's what he's here for. Let him do it.
Do you believe, though, that he really does have ufology's best interest at heart?
Here, this is what they always say about experiencers, right? I believe he believes he has ufology's best interest at heart. So, there. There we go. They fell off.
Okay. On the flip side of this, there's a lot of people who believe he has an agenda because he does have his book coming out where apparently it's going to be a lot of information that he hasn't shared recently. Everybody is quickly anticipating what is going to be happening there regarding the information. Do you think, though, that we are looking at the precipice of something big coming out with a major announcement soon, whether it's from Lou or whether it's from government officials?
I think for the last 2 years or the last year especially, we've been in this ebb and tide of information. And I think, now that we're in this third or fourth cycle of it, shame on you if you don't really believe that buzz that something's coming, because it has, and it's going to continue. So, I mean, some people can say that they want what they want, and I've never spoken with, I even don't, I call him Lou all the time, and that feels so disrespectful because I've never met him, but he's doing his job. We need to stand behind him. I know people think that he's a liar or he's a spin artist or something, but I've been called that in the last week myself. So I think it's a pitfall we all face. And Lou will get there. I think I haven't caught him in a lie yet. Let's put it that way. If he says something's coming, something's coming. And I'm excited for that. And a selfie with him and Melon, well, when the two of them buddy up, stuff comes out. Discs appear. Things get exchanged. So, I mean, I'd be excited to figure out anything that they're doing together. So, I want more than a selfie and a tweet, though. And if I have to wait for a book, that's fine. Of course, I'll buy it. So, we all have our agendas, I guess, is one way of putting it, whether they're big or small. There you go.
It is very interesting, to say the least. Down in Australia, journalist Ross Coulthard announced a story about Australian UFOs and some of the sightings that they have had down in Australia regarding this phenomena. Of course, we're all familiar, if you're into this subject, with the secret military base there called Pine Gap, where there's not a lot of information about what's going on. But one of the things, and one of the stories he shared, was about a crucial witness named Tanya, who went to West Hall High School in 1966, where there was a UFO Tic Tac style seen hovering near the school. She then described in her story about how she was approached as a child by American officials, almost like Men in Black, telling her to be quiet about what she saw in the interest of national security. Men in Black. Now, granted, we don't hear a lot of Men in Black stories about today, but back then they seemed to be quite fervent around popular sightings around here. Do you think the Men in Black were or had the ability to be American down there, worried about Australian sightings of a child? When
I first heard this, and I meant to do some digging on it, to me, this snidbit of narrative kind of harkens back all the way to Donald Kehoe doing his tours. And, when he went to Australia and was trying to like sound the alarm that there was this, UFO cover up happening, that there was something in our skies, I believe he had gathered reports of maybe not necessarily men in black, but government or U.S. government officials interviewing witnesses there. So, I mean, whether it's men in black or the U.S. government, coming into cases in other countries, I think, yes, that happens. I think it's been happening throughout the modern history of ufology. So they are an allied nation. It kind of makes sense in some realm of thinking, but I think it's interesting. And if Ross Coulter is blowing the whistle on something, I think, that makes everybody's ears perk up like, huh? Yes. So.
All right. I want to get your opinion on Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, along with Bill Nelson from NASA, recently starting to use the word extraterrestrial in their conversations. No longer are we hearing Russia, no longer are we hearing China, no longer are we hearing the words foreign adversary, but this is the first time we're hearing some very important people regarding this subject use the word extraterrestrial when talking about the adventures of these Tic Tacs that have been formed. This is a big step. Okay, we have heard about these phases, Nicole. Phase 1 was introducing the mainstream to the public. Phase 2 was the start of confirmation that this isn't anything of human nature and made by humans, and we need government to start talking about this. Have we officially or unofficially started Phase 3 from what I'm hearing, which is the extraterrestrial phenomena?
I think it might be the rumblings of it, when we talk about these phases, Steve Bassett's truth embargo always pops up into my head, and that's one thing he's been saying is, that extraterrestrials, that word, or, it's going to enter the conversation. And I don't know his timeline on things. I know he might throw one out, but I might chalk this one over to Mr. Bassett there for saying it's going to happen, and here we're seeing it in fruition. And I think there's a lot of us in the community that are maybe going, woohoo, she said it, it's about time, and there's others that are going, it's still not enough, or others going, well, she should have said ultra terrestrials. And some going, at least she didn't call them aliens. So it's hard to tell right now.
No, and I get you, but is the mainstream media, in your opinion, missing the entire point of the words extraterrestrial now being used in the symbolism of these craft?
Don't they miss a lot these days? I mean, we could harp for another 20 minutes on journalism ignoring this or not paying attention enough. I mean, what disaster do we really want to blame it on this week? We've heard all through the last year that it's like, oh, COVID, the headline, COVID, Trump. We're not hearing about disclosure because of this. So, I mean, I don't know. It goes hand in hand. We'll just have to take it for what it is and keep going. It's a good thing.
All right.
Extraterrestrials. Like, we'll get there. We'll get to ultra terrestrials in another 60 years. It's all right.
Nicole Sackage filling in for John Hudson, who is ailing, who is normally here for the unbiased UFO report. Nicole, you are absolutely wonderful. If you want to stick around, we'll put you behind the scenes here and let you go because it's time for us to get to Shirky Poo's news.
Bye, everybody. Thanks. Thanks for letting me fill in.
The news is always changing, which is why we turn to Shirky Boo's news here on the show. We're going to go down to Brazil right off the bat, where a very handsome model in Brazil has married 9 women in what he has called a celebration of free love and a protest against monogamy. Brazilian model Arturo Urso was already married to blogger Luana Kazaki, but then they wanted to formalize their marriage with a collective wedding. The pair are swingers and are known for their love of stripping off their clothes, thankfully in places where clothes are more of an option than a requirement. Urso and Kazaki spent their first marriage's honeymoon in Cap d'Agde, and also known as the Naked City, a self-contained town in France where nudity is legal and encouraged. So, earlier this month, Kazaki was seen walking her masked and collared husband on a leash through a crowded train station. People were surprised by the costume, said Orso. We were also reprimanded. But their fetish doesn't stop there. No, the husband and wife, number one, are also known on OnlyFans, sharing their tips about a better sex life. But now they have their own harem. They've married 8 other women and welcomed them into the field. Free love is alive and well in Brazil. All right. Hey, this is a pretty polite bear. A black bear walked inside a California 7-Eleven and gave the worker, of course, quite a fright. But guess what? It's also very health conscious, too. No, the bear was not wearing a mask, but while in the store, trouncing around, looking to see what kind of rubbish it could find and junk food it could steal, the bear decided that before he grabbed anything, he was going to set off the automated hand sanitizer dispenser and dropped a few onto his head, which in turn he grabbed his big paws, started massaging it in, giving a few hand rubs together, and therefore he was statistically clean. And yes, he did sing happy birthday twice in order to make sure that the sanitizer got to all the relevant spots for clean paws. The bear eventually left the area, but not before getting shot by rubber bullets. You know, no, the bear was not hurt. It just got scared and decided to knock over some trash cans on its way back into the forest. All right, a Miami, Florida mansion once owned by Madonna is back on the market with the seller a very pampered German Shepherd. The Vogue hitmaker sold the waterfront property to the trust of a German Shepherd named Gunther VI in 2000, and now the hound's managers are offloading the pad. The high-living hound was born into the lavish lifestyle of his ancestor Gunther III, who was awarded millions when his owner, German Countess Carlotta Liebenstein, passed away in 1992, according to the Associated Press. Gunther VI's trust is worth nearly $500 million. The 1.2-acre waterfront property is now in the market with an asking price of $31.75 million, way above the $7.5 million the pop star asked for the place 21 years ago. Wow. Okay. See what else we got here. Have you seen that episode of The Simpsons where Homer gets banned from a seafood buffet for eating too much? Well, Homer's real-life equivalent has been found in China, where a man goes by the name of Mr. Kang. Yeah, not Mr. Plow, Mr. Kang. And just like Homer, Mr. Kang can eat immense quantities of food at once. Just like Homer, he's been kicked out for good of the Handati Seafood Barbecue Buffet, one of his favorite restaurants. Kang calls the treatment he received discriminatory. After all, he hasn't exactly done anything wrong. I can eat a lot. Is that my fault, he says? However, Kang did mention how much food he ate, and the amounts of food are pretty disgusting. On one visit, he consumed 3 pounds of pork tauters. While binging on that, he ate nearly 9 pounds of shrimp. However, the man claims he didn't waste any of the food. In his own words, he ate all of it. I think we got time for one more here, quickly. All right. Recent intense storms in Egypt have caused a deadly plague of scorpions hanging around. The heavy rains, dust storms, and snow in Aswan have led thousands of scorpions on the move. So far, they've killed 3 people, injuring about 500 more with their stingers. That's your Shirky Poo news for the day. Thank you to Nicole Sackage for sitting in on the Unbiased UFO Report, and to Dr. Debbie Felton talking to us about ancient serial killers and hauntings. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thaw rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone hanging out with us tonight on YouTube, Twitch, LGAB, Revolution Radio, Spreaker, Facebook, the Space Travelers Club, and on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio. I know you're out there somewhere. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends, Nicole,
we're watching.
We own the night.
Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home. Yes, the Woo train has docked for the night. But soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we've got room for them too. Good night.